sorry, but I must interrupt this show. Lennard, you know what it is. Hey, ham solo. It's time, baby. Low. It's time how we do. Hey. They said we said we hit. They said we said we on. They said we said we strong. They said we said go. We say that you heard right. 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 They said we said we in. They said we said we on. They said we said strong. They said we said go. We say that you heard right. We say that you heard right. We say that you heard right. We say that you man. I swear that it's imminent. I've been going so hard on my penmanship. About to go in and buy me a whip, and I pull that shit fresh off the dealership. I can leave you on red like an Xbox. Got me laughing at you like you red fox. Got you chasing hot wheels like a matchbox. EA running the game and it don't stop. Super cold like I'm playing for Blizzard. Got you all in my sights like Red Dead Redemption. Never gonna slip on my pimpin'. Better get out my way, bitch. I'm on a mission. Really ain't no competition. I'm steady grilling opposition. I'm get up and ready to win. They can play it how they play, but fuck what you say. I'm getting this money today. Last of us like a dying breed. Down the ride like a noble steed. Fatality moves, I make it bleed. That's on any game, that's on any screen. Shut up and give me your money. They said we so lit. Even if I take an L, we coming back just to show that we don't quit. They said we hit. They said we on. They said we strong. They said we go.
Awesome. What's cracking, everybody? Welcome to another phenomenal episode of Behind Them Sticks with your boy Ham Solo 05 Gaming here with you on the TSWS Gaming YouTube channel. And today, I got another phenomenal guest here with me, a brother that just so happens to have a show of his own and have a website and everything of his own where he keeps up to date with things that are going on within gaming. I'd like to introduce to you guys Mr. Ains. How are you doing?
I'm
What's
good,
cracking,
man.
brother? Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. It's a good day, man. We got Xbox Developer Direct, we got
Man, it
Diablo, we got Halo tomorrow, man, which is where I live and breathe. So yeah, good times in gaming, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into all the history and stuff that in like current events and things that that's been going on within gaming, I do want to give you the respect to go on ahead and let everybody know where they can find you. And while you do that, I'm gonna go on ahead and show everybody some of like the places and what it looks like. I mean, you got your logo there in the background with the SG Season Game. But but I like to show people just so they have a good idea of, oh yeah, I landed into the right spot.
Okay. Yeah. So Season Gaming's where we do everything. So seasongaming.com. You can find reviews, articles, our podcast, anything we do there, videos from the YouTube channel. And then we are across, Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky. Twitter, as I know many of us have joked about, has kind of taken a little dive lately in some of its functionality. But yeah, I mean, as long as you know seasongaming.com, everything links from there. So as you can see, our podcast is there. We have features that are coming up. The weekly live show, we're live on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're, there's not many Ainsleys out there. So as long as you know Ainsley and Season Gaming, you're good to go. You can find us everywhere.
Yep, and there you go. I was just showing you guys a few spots where you guys can check them out. There's their YouTube channel, as you could see right there. I also showed you the actual website, which is right here, Season Gaming. And then you've seen the Twitter as well right there. So go on ahead and check those out. Hit that subscribe button or follow, whichever one that you happen to go to. But anyways, let's go on ahead and get in to today's episode. So, brother, again, I'd like to thank you so much for giving me your time, giving me some of your energy and knowledge. But when I was asking you earlier, like, yo, what was like the first console that you ever got into? And we just briefly talked. We barely even talked before you got in here. Just had a few minutes before the show started, and you're like, man, I'm an old head. I Atari 2600, and I was like, here we go again. Another Atari 2600 brother out here. He's clearly saying that I've been here since the beginning. damn near is what you out here doing. So just talk about it. What actually intrigued you about the Atari 2600? Was it like the multiplayer, like you playing with somebody else? Was it like you just so happened to, be, raised in the right home and just so happened, we got lucky and got a 2600, or, maybe you're new to gaming and you just so happen to see one at the Goodwill and you picked it up and you're just like, what happened? Like you said, you're an old head, so I'm guessing you had some history with it. What sparked your love for gaming starting with the 2600?
Yeah. So I think at the time was fortunate for sure. Very early 80s at my house, my dad had bought an Atari 2600. So my brother and sister are older than me. And so I was kind of the little kid, 3-4 years old, while they were playing on the 2600. And so, I picked it up pretty quick in terms of just enjoying what was going on. And back then, of course, you're just playing on the same screen and stuff. But I love that alongside, in parallel to that, going to the arcade. So, both my parents would take me to the arcade and get me a little stool, to stand on so I could actually reach the arcade cabinets and just playing those classic arcade games. We had Missile Command and Space Invaders and Star Wars and all that jazz. So it's been a long time gaming, but I have loved it since that point. So every kind of generation back then was kind of unique, more so than now, right? So you went from Atari, and then that kind of carried through to the original Nintendo, right? The NES, which kind of took over the world for kids at that time in the mid 80s. And then ever since then, it's been gaming. So I've owned almost every console you could probably name, thousands and thousands of games, and just kind of have loved it and breathed it for over 40 years now.
Yeah, I mean, that's deep and quite a bit of time to go through it, seeing that's, almost the age of gaming, Yeah, I mean, it's only been around for 60, 70 years.
Yeah, I mean, especially at home, right? Like Pong was pretty much, you talk about early 70s is probably the kind of genesis of it. Yeah, but it didn't really take off anywhere until Atari 2600. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, and I mean, there were obviously, those things going on behind closed doors because people had like those mega computers and they'd like make those like silly little games on them. Like there was like a tennis game which was like one of the first early games to come out with, and it was like only playable if you were at like this university that had it, right? But now it's expanded so much to where everyone's seeing everybody playing all different types of games all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So like it just doesn't matter. But I want to know from you, like, what was it like in the household for you entering into, the idea of gaming regularly?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like I think back, I try to remember, it's been a long time, but my earliest memories of really enjoying it were with the 2600 and playing games like Adventure, which is the little thing I have up here behind me, or Pitfall or stuff. And I think like I would watch my dad at the time or my brother play games, and I just wanted to be involved. I didn't really understand the concept of what games were at the time. I just wanted to be involved. So then, kind of once I picked it up, and games were a lot more simple back then too. So it was easier to acclimate, but it's just like, as soon as I kind of got my hands on that controller and started playing, I was into it. I just loved it. And so every time we got a new game or anything, I just wanted to sit there and try and figure it out. It was more like almost like a puzzle as a little kid, trying to figure out how the game worked, like what were the mechanics? How was it different from the other games? And that always kind of intrigued me. And then by the time you get to the Nintendo era and the early Sega Master System era, which I adored, that's when it really kind of exploded and your friends started to get involved. It started to get a little bigger, and, then you would have friends over your house and playing, and, it kind of evolved a little bit there. But in the very beginning with just my family, it was more of like trying to figure out what even was a video game. How did it work? What were the differences? And I just always loved that. It was just always fascinating to me that I could control what was going on the screen. And I think that was very different. Loved movies growing up, loved music to death, but games were always something special to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. So if that was, really special during that time, so now I'm kind of trying to move on from like the Atari 2600, and I want to move just a little bit past the NES, right? So like the NES is out, the Sega is out, like Sega Master System is out, and we're starting to work towards the, like, whether you want to call it the Genesis or whatever. Where were you kind of at during that time where cartridge gaming really evolved, and like, you're starting to see all these different types of developers, you're starting to see all these different types of sports games? It's not like what it is now at all, where it's just like, this developer does sports. It was just like, you were seeing Acclaim doing sports, you were seeing, EA doing sports, you were seeing all types of like companies that you wouldn't expect having a sports game. Sega Sports was a big deal back then as well. So I want you to kind of talk about what it was like when there was just like all these different types of titles, and you said that you played like all these consoles pretty much throughout the time, so you understood like how big of a deal it was with the Sega coming and taking some mind share away from Nintendo. And what was that like in your eyes?
Yeah, it was fun, man. There's endless stories I could tell. I would say that the most memorable that I always kind of harken back to is first seeing the NES and first seeing Super Mario Brothers. Because that was over at a friend's house. So I go over to my friend's house. I only know the Atari at that point, and he has a new NES with Super Mario Brothers, and it just kind of blew my mind. I can literally still, 40 years later, remember what that was like. And we stayed up all night just playing Super Mario Brothers, the original. And I think that once we got to that age and you get to NES, and then, Nintendo becomes really big. Sega Master System wasn't very big, even though I had one and loved it to death. And then, as you said, the Genesis comes out and kind of, punches Nintendo a little bit anyway. And it became really interesting at that point, because at that point, Genesis is way more advanced. The Super Nintendo wouldn't come out for a couple years yet. And so you had this kind of battle between all the original Nintendo games and Genesis. And as you said, there's a lot of interesting things with development that started happening. More developers were popping up, more types of genres of games. You mentioned Sega Sports, which is funny because I can also still remember the first time seeing Joe Montana football, which when you first heard the announcer, Sports Talk Football, we were blown away. You know what I mean? I had played the original Madden. In fact, I think I still have my original Madden and NHL copies, like the first ones. But when I first saw the announcer in Joe Montana football, that was wild, first seeing that. And, we played the hell out of that. And it just continued to evolve. I think that's where it really began to kind of escalate in terms of starting to realize the potential of games. I think Atari was kind of just getting your foot in the door. Once Nintendo blew up and we started to see RPGs and side scrollers and sports, and that expanded in the 16-bit era, and it just kind of changed the way I think people started thinking about games. And I think those of us who were first, even, playing games at that point in time and alive, but the ones of us that had been doing it for a while started to really see the potential of what games could be. And that's when gaming magazines got bigger. You know what I mean? Just the whole industry started to really grow into something that was more recognizable. And it just, it was amazing. It was amazing times. And remember the 16-bit era there through the 32-bit, late probably 90s, right, is when the arcade scene was really popping off too, right? So you had Street Fighter 2, and you had Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, and you had, all these games that were just generating huge money and people coming to the arcades and competitions. And it was a fantastic, fantastic time for gaming. In some ways, like I've said this before, I adore what gaming is today and how accessible it is and how many options we have. Like, we are absolutely in the golden age of gaming today, but there are aspects about those times that I miss.
You know, and I got an aspect that I kind of want to bring out right now,
Sure.
because I feel like, and see, I love having conversations like this, because I don't always get these type of conversations with people. I mean, I always get to hear people's history and whatnot, but not a lot of people grew up and I can like really relate with on like the history of some of these older consoles,
Yeah.
and like the feeling that it gave you, and just like just the time, was just different so much back then. If you don't mind me asking you real quick, how old were you around when the Sega came out? What's the Genesis?
Genesis, I was 11.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So I want you to explain to me what it was like for you, household, school, and all that when you started to see games like Road Rash come out, NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, you know, games that really brought out maturity.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think, first seeing the Genesis and the promise of arcade graphics at home is what they promoted, right? With Altered Beast and Ghouls and Ghosts and stuff. And it was pretty incredible, because at that point, right, you're 11 years old, you're in middle school or elementary school or whatever your friends are. And you're kind of, in my neighborhood, I lived in townhouse and we didn't have a lot of money. So it's not like I had all these games to come home to. Like, they were being developed and published, but I couldn't afford them. My mom couldn't afford to buy them for me, right? So a lot of people back then, a lot of kids, at least that I knew, would come together and you would share your library, right? So the whole goal was about buying games together. Like, what are you asking for Christmas? What are you asking for Christmas? What games do we want to play together? And that would even go for systems too. So not only Genesis, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx.
Yeah. Mama, I don't get that one. Ryan's get that.
Exactly. So
I want to get the Jam.
Yeah. So you start to see those games, and you would get a new game, and you'd be like, "Hey guys, I got this game," and your friends would come over, and you'd play it for a while. And every time, it was almost like every time someone got a new game, especially one like you're saying, like the Mortal Kombat's, once you felt you were kind of playing something that you weren't supposed to be playing, it was like an event. Every game release, every game that was bought by one of the kids in my neighborhood was an event, and you would get together to explore it and play it. And it was just, it's an era. I don't know about you, but it's an era that I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face. But like, those that I speak to that are, say, when they were little kids, was PlayStation 2, the younger generation now, they can't conceptualize what that was like, because by the time they were in their middle school days or in their teenage days, online gaming was already a thing. And all of these genres were already a thing. And you just, that's what you did already at that point. Obviously, it's expanded a lot even since then. But it's drastic, like the OG Xbox, PS2, Dreamcast, all those are drastically different from what it was a decade prior. And I think that it's hard to explain to the younger generation now just how kind of special that was. And then, like I said, we used to ride our bike to the mall to play in the arcade. Right. So anytime, the same kind of feeling you would get when you go in the arcade and you see a new cabinet. I still remember, I was a big Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter player, like competition tournaments and everything. And I still remember riding the arcade and first going in and seeing Mortal Kombat 2. Because again, back then there's no internet, there's no big reveal trailer that got leaked. You know what I mean? You just showed up at the arcade and there's a new cabinet sitting in front of you that you've never seen before. And it was just a different type of experience to today, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you look around now, and not only do people have like the availability of like the internet and all these different ways of playing, but like you just said, you had to go to the arcade to see certain things. Now people have arcades in their house, like flat out. You have everything, or sometimes more than a freaking arcade literally can give you,
No
right?
doubt.
Like you see some of these people's PCs that run like, you know, channels on YouTube and stuff like that. They have a full on like pretty much airplane as their PC, where they got all the dials, all the, you know, things to make the plane move and stop, and you know, people got whole driving setups with the VR and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Bro, I used to be so excited to go to Chuck E. Cheese just to hop on one of the yeah, man, just to hop on one of like the ride-on bikes or
Oh
something. You
yeah,
know what I'm
man.
saying?
Yeah. The cabinet with the steering wheel, you know, even playing. I was telling someone the other day who didn't grow up in the era about Paperboy, and there was the Paperboy where it actually had the bike handle, you know, the bike handlebar, and you would throw the papers off. I said the stuff like that was amazing, man. Like it's crazy to think what used to be available and what used to come out in the arcades.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, shout out to Ray Chi in the chat. He says cartridges are easier to share than CDs. Absolutely. You didn't want to like, I mean, unless somebody spilled something on your cartridge or tried to rip something off of like rip the art off of the front, which, you know, usually, you know, the friends respected each other's stuff, so they didn't do that. But every once in a while we had, you know, everybody has that guy as a friend that's just like,
yeah,
just doesn't respect nothing that they own or none of your stuff or anything like that. But yeah, definitely much more shareable than PlayStation games ended up being, and Xbox games ended up being. A lot more safer to give out, and not willing to want to, you know, have a fight with your friends and stuff like that after allowing them to borrow. Like, man, I don't get the second screen on the PlayStation symbol. Like, the game don't work anymore, bro. You gave it to me scratch. You gave it back scratch. Like you don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, Richie. But anyways, moving on. So that era was exceptionally hot with the cartridges and Sega, and then obviously not long after, the Super Nintendo was a big deal. But so I'm wondering, how did you dabble? Because as time went on, you know, Nintendo started to go towards, you know, handheld gaming with the, you know, Game Boy.
Yep.
And then they you know, ended up having, as well as like the Virtual Boy. Sega, on the other hand, went more pieces for their hardware. So you'd have, you know, what was the
at 32X.
Well, I'm not quite getting to that yet. The controller expansion thing, to where you can plug into 4 controllers. You can have 4 people playing on a screen. Yep. So like all 4 of you guys could be playing like Road Rash or something, right?
Yeah.
And then yes, they also had, like, you know, as you were just alluding to, the 32X, the Sega CD. And then they had variations of those things as time progressed, you know, make them either smaller or more functional. Because the original Sega CD that thing was not the best, and even the second edition of it wasn't the best either. The reader on that thing is only so good. But anyways, especially looking to now, so many years later. But I gotta ask, like, what direction did you start to take during that? Did you go more of the Nintendo route, or did you go more of the Sega route at that time?
I went whatever I could get my hands on. In the sense of I was working by that point, and making minimum wage, you know, next to nothing, and I couldn't afford a lot of stuff. So what I started doing was like looking for deals and buying and selling. I started like bartering and trading ways to find new games. So Super Nintendo and Genesis, of course, and then TurboGrafx was another one. And then by then 3DO came out a couple years later. Didn't really take off, but got one of those for cheap, like a year after release.
I was gonna say Mr. Big Bucks, but you just said I got
No,
it for cheap. You said you got it for cheap.
I got it for cheap, man. No, it was on clearance, when no one was buying it. Still the best version of Road Rash, though.
Yeah. Soundgarden.
Yeah, no doubt. So like, just a lot of that. I was buying and selling games an awful lot and trading with friends and just figuring out ways to get whatever I could get my hands on. And then of course, at that point, by the mid 90s is when you started to hear about this PlayStation thing coming. And that's what I started to get my eyes on at that point, is getting a PlayStation, which I eventually did by selling my 3DO and a bunch of games.
Okay, so
yeah,
Saturn wasn't in the question.
It was. It was kind of funny with the Saturn. So if you remember like vividly that, so I actually got invited to buy the Saturn because I was a big Sega guy, and the Saturn launched early, a surprise launch in '94, was it, or something like that? And I didn't have the money for it, so I couldn't afford it. So Saturn comes out, and I kind of just let it develop, if you will, and then obviously the Saturn didn't do very well, and so I picked up a Saturn, but it was later down the line.
Okay. Yeah. But as you said, you went with the PlayStation eventually. Yeah. So an original PlayStation, Battle Arena, Toshinden, and Destruction Derby, and all those original games. But I had that, like I said, I was constantly swapping out systems and games, whatever I could do to play the most games, basically. So during that era, obviously, big games like Wipeout, Siphon Filter.
Oh yeah.
Tomb Raider was hot back then. Gran Turismo made its debut.
Gran Turismo was my jam. I'm a car guy, if you didn't know, other than gaming. And so Gran Turismo kind of changed our perspective on everything. Me and my friends played Gran Turismo forever.
Yeah, Gran Turismo was lovely. Ridge Racer was outside. Parappa the Rapper was doing its thing. I remember that sucker being on one of the demo discs back then. Let's see. There were so many great games for it. I just recently actually picked up myself a Japanese version of an original PlayStation. Because I got a couple imports, but the most notable one that I recently picked up was this one right here, which is it's called Dragon Ball Z Legends, super old school one. But I absolutely love the original PlayStation. It was a great console. I was really big in the sports back in the day, so what was it like, In the Zone and
NFL Game Day they had at
NFL Game Day, Game Breaker. Then after 989 started to slow down a little bit, the EA really came into the picture big with NCAA footballs. I think it was like 99 and 2000, and of course the Maddens, can't forget about those. But yeah, PlayStation really shaped up and like had like the third parties. I mean, can't forget about like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, right? Like it really came to form essentially, and started like blowing the backs out of all these other companies that were out here just trying to figure it out. Because keep in mind, a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, the Saturn got ate up," but nobody wants to talk about the Jaguar. Nobody wants to talk about the 3DO. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to talk. And what I wanted to ask you, or what I'm kind of alluding to right now, is where. Not so much of what were you thinking back then, more or less like what do you think about it now, seeing that there was so much competition there, although not a lot of the competition was really really doing it properly. Like 3DO was kind of all over the place with how they wanted to do things. Nintendo was, doing their own thing as they always seem to do with with the 64. The Jaguar was like more of a let's try again kind of thing. The Sega Saturn was like the fear of PlayStation mixed with trying to stay relevant with being the the adult console kind of thing. So where do you like how do you kind of think of all this stuff looking back?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and it's hard to describe it if you didn't live through it, because I think what's really interesting about that time period, as you just described, is that you had all these different video games were still very much figuring themselves out, and they were growing rapidly, but it was an intersection of technology at the time, and there were all these different competing technologies for how you could deliver video games to people in their home. If you think about it now, we have this continuing escalation of tech, but there's a blueprint, if you will, or a standard of how that's delivered. You have your, NVIDIA or AMD CPU, you have a GPU, and you have a certain speed of RAM, and they work cohesively, on a SoC to deliver X experience, and the next generation will just multiply those out by factors. Back then, you're talking about systems that were trying all sorts of different things, and I think that the perfect kind of storm happened with PlayStation, where they took a gamble on new technology, being the CD, to deliver games at times, combined with putting their reputation on the line, which back in the 90s, Sony was a dominant force in terms of TVs and stereos and Walkmans. And I mean, Sony was everywhere. And so Sony coming to the table and saying, hey, we're making video games now. And by the way, we can provide, full motion video and graphics, and we can provide more data and storage and have bigger games than these other things over here, right? Like the N64 stayed with cartridges, as we know. 3DO was a little outdated at the time. It just was this perfect storm of things coming together for PlayStation to really kind of open everyone's eyes and blow the doors off, which of course then leads to them doing almost the same thing again with the PS2 and moving to Blu-ray discs, or DVDs, excuse me, not Blu-rays, DVDs, which again just expanded the capability for storage of games and experiences and everything else. So I think Sony having that edge in technology at the time, and that to be able to develop that technology and patent it in some certain ways, just kind of really took the rug out from Sega and Panasonic, 3DO, et cetera, at the time. It's a really interesting study of a time in video game history, in my opinion.
It is, because I mean, there was just so much going on, so much choice, but it was just so obvious what was dominant.
Yeah. PlayStation took over pretty quickly. Yeah,
it did. It just came through and just swept. It just swept pretty much like anybody that was kind of like, really a lot of the Sega fans. If I'm being honest, because I mean, my household was Sega, big time. But the way they rolled out the Saturn was just not right. Like just not only did they roll it out weird, but they also had mixed messaging, because you had the 32X that just came out. And you already tried CD, and the hype behind what you gave us with the CD wasn't that innovative. If I'm being honest, the audio for it was like the feature for it. They didn't really seem to have too much. Like, you were still like, you think about it, like you still had like the same controller. It's just especially if you're using the 3DO or Sega CD, you're still using the exact same controller as before. So that was weird. And then on top of that, the graphics are marginally better, but not even like consistent through all of it, really. Like some of it, the cartridge versions were better than the disc version. So it was like kind of weird with some of the stuff that was going on there.
It just wasn't well thought out for a future perspective. It was an evolution of what was already done, whereas PlayStation came in and said, this is what it's going to be in the future. And it opened everybody's eyes, and it completely changed the game. I don't think people today, that's going back to 94 in Japan, 95 here. So at this point in time, you're going back almost 30 years. And I don't think, like, my son, right, who's a late teenager, has no idea how influential the PlayStation was when it first hit the market. It's just today it's a known brand, of course, but globally. But when it first came out, it was a huge risk. And of course, that's before getting into the failed relationship with Nintendo and Sony to develop the PlayStation and everything that went on behind the scenes there, which is also really interesting. But it's hard to describe now just how much the original PlayStation changed the industry. It's substantial.
Okay, so the original PlayStation came in hot as hell. The N64 did its thing. 3DO got phased out. Atari, phased themselves out pretty much.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Sega, was on its last leg. And the next generation is upon us, and it looks like Sega is cooking. Sega's cooking, and I don't mean like they're cooking up some ramen. No, they were cooking. They had some ribs on the grill. We could you could smell it a few houses away. It was hot. What they had was popping with the Sega Dreamcast with when that came out, and the way that it was like they flipped the entire script on what they had did prior and reminded us why they were so unbelievably interesting, but at the same time such geniuses when it came to marketing, right? With the whole 99.99 thing and the weird intrigue of the woman, running around like a cobra, like a covert op in the commercials, and then they got Sonic talking to Afro Thunder and bringing people on a dance floor with like a football player sitting there with like AI and stuff like that. It was like it was weird, but it was a reminder of like, yo, like Sega, they know how to market, and at that point, not only did they know how to market, they knew how to create phenomenal games. They had Sega Sports reappearance with the 2K games, extra hot, and then they had the extra edition, which made it cooler with the VMU added to it to give those sports games a little extra umph, especially when you're playing like couch versus. Right? So you can pick your plays through the VMU and bro can't see your screen, right? You can't see what you're doing. And then on top of that, the reemergence of Sonic with Sonic Adventure, the big deal that was Shenmue that came through. I mean, bro, talk about the Dreamcast for you and what it meant to you as you grew into gaming further.
Yeah, man, the Dreamcast is special. So I still have my original Dreamcast. I have the original box. I have the original receipt from KB Toys when I got it. I have the keyboard. I have everything from my original Dreamcast. That was a special day going into KB on 9/9/99.
That's hot. Yeah, I mean, I got a Dreamcast too, but I ain't got the receipt, the original one or the box.
Yeah, I put out that box.
Just remember how hot that box was, man.
Yeah. Everything about it was amazing. It was an incredibly well done system, and it was very well thought out. And I think that it had some fantastic years with the Dreamcast. Definitely one of my favorite consoles. I've always been very big in online gaming ever since the very beginning. I built a PC for MMOs in like the mid 90s. Like I was one of those people with the phone line hooked up and everything. And So not only Dreamcast and Sega making its reemergence with this powerful new console, but also SegaNet and what that became, where you could game and play Quake and NFL 2K1 and all those legendary games over the internet. I loved it. And it was, it was a special few years where I really enjoyed everything to do with the Dreamcast. And it was kind of on that cusp. It felt like Sega was back, to your point, which was fantastic. And I was fully invested in the Dreamcast. And of course, you then get into a couple years later with the PlayStation 2 arriving and original Xbox and stuff, and things change pretty rapidly at that point. Yeah. And it's a shame. I know many of us have said it countless times, but it's a shame that the Dreamcast came in this kind of like midpoint between where technology had changed from the PlayStation 1 era for a few years and changed the industry, and Sega kind of acclimated to all of that. But then technology whacked them again, and a couple years later, the Dreamcast was behind the curve again. And I think at that point, as we all know, Sega just couldn't invest, enough financially to really kind of stay on the hardware space of the market. But okay. Dreamcast is special, man. Will always be special to me.
Yeah, it's easily in my top 3 of favorite consoles of all time. One of the main reasons was just what Shenmue did to me was just that experience. Like obviously, like Soul Calibur was hot.
Yeah,
Soul Calibur was hot. I remember playing Grand Theft Auto 2 on that console. Yeah. Crazy Taxi was hot. Yep. Like I said, Sonic Adventure 2 for me was my favorite one of the two.
And Marvel vs. Capcom 2, another legendary game.
I want to take you for a ride. yeah, absolutely. That was hot. That was hot. But what Shenmue did, bro, to me, like just the level of detail in the game at the time, the ability to run around, like this is before Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah.
Right? So it was just wild. And then the availability to be able to just walk up to somebody and just talk to them. And sometimes that conversation don't go good. Like, you talk to one of the schoolgirls walking around in Shenmue and she like, what the hell do you want? And I'm like, yo, like, excuse me. And, running around town, and then bro checks his watch and says, oh crap, I need to be home. People closing down shops, doing their things. Everybody had daily deeds of things that they were supposed to do in the game. And
it was pretty wild.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
At that time. Come to the arcade at 7 p.m. and you checking your watch, right? And you're running from your house to the arcade. There's no fast travel. You have to walk your ass there. Right? So like that was an extremely wild experience for me at that point, and I just have to give them their flowers. But moving on from the Dreamcast and all of its utter greatness, we then had the collapse, but the collapse didn't quite happen until after the PlayStation 2 had came in. And the PlayStation 2 came in really hot as well. I mean, I'd argue it came in hotter than the original PlayStation because just the ability of not only can I play games, but this is now my new VCR, aka DVD player.
Yep. Yeah. Again, just another Sony utilizing their own technology to give themselves an advantage, and it worked remarkably well. I mean, they dominated the market from day one with the PlayStation 2. And then once you start securing the JRPGs, all the, sports titles, EA says they're not going to be on Dreamcast, the sports titles. And it was all just PlayStation ran from there, man. I mean, still the best selling console of all time to this day, the PlayStation.
Yeah, do you think
2.
It'll ever be caught by anything?
I don't know. I think what really made the PlayStation 2 kind of gets the level it is, because Switch is way up there now, right? Switch is in the 120, high 220s. But even with Switch being as successful as it is still nearly 30 million units behind the PS2. And what really kind of made the PS2 where it is that longevity. They continued to sell the PS2 a decade later around the world, in other nations. And so the global effect combined with the longevity is tough. I don't know if we ever see it topped, honestly. Because if one console was going to do it, I'd say probably the Switch would have done it at this point, but another 30 million, I don't know if I see it happening, man, especially with the Switch 2 probably coming this year. I think it was just a unique time period. I don't know if we'll ever see it. And hardware is not the same as it is, same now as it was then. So I don't know.
And back in that day, and I mean, you bring a very valid point when you say that, because back in that day, what made that PS2 so special and having that, and, we talked about having the DVD drive. It was so special having that extra little piece back then, because not many there wasn't very many game or really any at that point. If I'm actually thinking about it correctly, there wasn't very many or any other platforms that were doing multifunctionality. No. Right? Like you can use this for this or that.
Yeah, right? You could play CDs on Dreamcast, but that was the extent of it, right?
Yeah, that was it. But you could also do that on your original PlayStation. You could do that on, your Sega CD. You could do that. You could have been doing that a long time ago. But the PlayStation 2 was like a great advertisement for kids to their parents, and being like, hey, I can play the video games, but then if you want to cut me off from video games and say, hey, we need to watch a family movie, we can do that on the same device.
No doubt. Yeah, and DVD, the DVD movie experience at home was such a vast improvement over VHS, just as CDs were to tape. So again, it just was that perfect storm for Sony of using their own technology and making something where you can sell it as a DVD player. Yeah, it can play games, but by the way, it can play DVDs. And it just worked out beautifully for them. And they had that market cornered until the Xbox came out. But even then, the Xbox didn't have the brand cachet that PlayStation did at that point because of the PlayStation 1. So it was just, PlayStation 2 definitely holds a unique place in console history. It's pretty wild, honestly, how successful that console was.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Xbox here momentarily, but right before I do go into that, I do want to talk about the Nintendo GameCube and the interest and intrigue from your perspective for that console and how it performed in your opinion. Like, that thing was pretty special to other than the Dreamcast, because I had the Dreamcast first. The GameCube was actually the first console that I got of the big four that were there. So, Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. GameCube was the first one I had, or excuse me, Dreamcast first, and then GameCube was the next one that I had in line. How did you feel about the GameCube? What were some games that really kind of stuck out for you during that time period?
Yeah, GameCube was cool, man. I looking back on it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I like the concept of it. I think Nintendo being weird with their mini discs, as always, right? I think that did them from a technology side, just like we were just talking about, did them a disservice to a degree, not being CD or DVD, especially. Regardless, I think it has a pretty strong library still today. Controller was funky. But I liked Mario Sunshine's a classic to me. I always loved the 3D Mario games. The funny thing about the GameCube, though, is in terms of my attention and playtime, it will always be kind of behind the scenes. It was never a big focus for me. Monkey Ball, by the way, I got to shout out Monkey Ball. Monkey Ball is awesome.
Monkey Ball, let's go.
But it was never a very big focus for me because of Xbox. So the story I've told many times is I had at that point, I'm 21, 22 years old. I'm making better money and I'm actually buying the games I want to buy at that point. Right. So I have a GameCube reserved at EB Games or whatever, Walden Software, whatever the store was. And with 6 games, I was like all in on GameCube. This is going to be Nintendo coming back after the N64, which was, again, a lot of fun with that system, a lot of fun with friends with that system. But it just wasn't like, they're moving to disc finally, and they're going to be more advanced. And
yeah, you're seeing you're seeing the quality difference now.
Yeah, the tech, like Nintendo's bringing the tech up.
Oh, this don't sound right on the 64.
So I had a GameCube and 6 games reserved, ready to go at launch. And Xbox, the original, famously launched 3 days apart of GameCube here in the US anyway.
Right.
About 2 weeks prior to the GameCube releasing and launching, obviously I knew about the Xbox. It was in game magazines, Microsoft's entering the space and all this, but I didn't have any interest in it. I was like, we'll see what it does. I'll try it, whatever. I just wasn't interested. About 2 weeks prior to going in to pick up my GameCube on NAB Games, and there's the original Xbox kiosk. And I pick up the fat hamburger controller we all know and laugh at and love, and fond memories of. And Halo CE is on the screen because they knew what they were doing from a marketing perspective. And, I know we were on GameCube here, but I'm giving you this context that Halo took over my life. From that moment that I played Halo, nothing else mattered in the gaming space. And so I went back and got an Xbox a couple days later. I forget the exact timeline with Halo. And basically my GameCube collected dust from there on out.
Oh,
so I liked the GameCube. I thought it was great. I had it at launch. I still have my launch GameCube. I have a bunch of games, but it just never got the attention that it should have from me because of Halo.
Okay, and I gotta ask before we jump into the Xbox part, because I feel like the Xbox part is pretty special for you.
Oh yeah,
the GameCube. Why do you think, in your opinion, was it kind of like it was a good console? It had phenomenal games on it. I have a GameCube. I went and got another one after because when I was young, I used to trade stuff in to get the next thing, as you were saying that you did back in the day. Right? That's that. Yeah, these young folks don't understand. That's
that
how
was a standard, man. You did what you had to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We was over here, we was scrounging. Sometimes we got to eat bologna for dinner because I done bought the new game. I'm trying to play this hot thing right here. I'll eat something weak for dinner tonight. But anyways, you know the struggle. But anyways,
I know. Trust me, I know. Yes.
but anyways, but going around that time, I'm just wondering, like, what makes you think that the GameCube was just not ever as sought after as either the Xbox? This is gonna sound silly, maybe, but I think a couple things. I think one, the technology factor, because right as the GameCube came out, you had 2 other brand new consoles on the market in Xbox and PlayStation 2 that could play DVDs, play CDs. On Xbox, you had the hard drive, which was incredible. You had online gaming that was taking off at the time for both Xbox. Xbox Live came in a year later. Obviously, PSN came in a little after that with their adapter. There were just a lot of things in that space where, again, technology kind of accelerated quickly, and GameCube just didn't have any of it. So I think combined with that, and the thing I said I thought may sound a little silly, but was just a coolness factor. The PlayStation 2 was cool. When you had a PlayStation 2, the Xbox was kind of edgy. It was the new kid on the block, but it was marketed as the adult console, the serious console, the powerful console. And GameCube was still playing in that space that felt more like a toy. And had the handle on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody used to make fun of that handle. I remember I had the GameCube, right? And I used to kind of be embarrassed just because of that handle, because I was just like it just although I look at it now and it just doesn't bother me, I don't even think about it. But back when, little things back when you were young and a kid and whatnot, because I was I want to say I was just just entering high school, or maybe I was somewhere in middle school or something like that with the GameCube. And although I loved Sunshine and Eternal Darkness, I had some of the mature games. NHL Hits back in the day was Hot Blitz.
They had the Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 0, and
I had some mature games, but when I went and pulled out, picked up my console to take it to a friend's house, it felt like I was carrying a purse. Like it just, it gave me kind of that purse feeling.
Yeah,
it just didn't seem right.
It didn't have the vibe to it. It's kind of indescribable in a sense. And I'm sure that worked in some markets and not others, but yeah, it didn't. It felt like it was. I guess the easiest way to say it was, even though the games were fantastic, and I like I said, I still love the GameCube. It felt dated almost immediately. You know what I mean? Like it's on the market at the same time as Xbox and PlayStation, and it didn't feel like those equals.
It didn't have that multifunction. I mean, it had multiple functions, but it didn't have the multiple functions that it made you jealous, right? Like it's like, oh man, you could do this with your Xbox. Like you can watch a movie with it and then turn around and play a game. On the GameCube, it's like I can play a GameCube game or I can play a Game Boy game, right? But I can't watch a movie on it, and a lot of third parties wasn't rocking with Nintendo the same way they were rocking with PlayStation.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, but Grand Theft Auto 3 comes out, changes the entire industry. Halo changes the entire industry. The EA Sports titles and the 2K titles, or the Visual Concepts, titles, are changing the industry in the sports space. All those big spaces of games at the time, like those big genres that were selling, especially in the US, tens of millions of copies or millions of copies maybe back then. Nintendo just wasn't playing in that space at all. And it's just the numbers speak for themselves,
Absolutely. So then moving on to my personal favorite console of all time, which is the OG Xbox. I am not afraid to announce that's my favorite console of all time by no means. I am so proud of it. I even got the opportunity to interview Seamus Blackley on this very same podcast. Awesome. Phenomenal. Really cool dude. But yeah, the original Xbox, great console, a lot of crazy features in it that we had never seen before. Ethernet ready from the jump. This said no dial up over here, but we doing it big or we not doing it at all. Had the system link capability as well, which was also a new feature. CD burning capabilities to be able to save your entire all these different CDs onto the console in an internal memory that we've never seen before, that felt almost and like we talk now about the cloud, right?
Yeah.
And how and when we look and think about the cloud, we're like, man, that the cloud is endless. That thing could hold as much as you want, right? Well, back in the day, the cloud was the Xbox. The Xbox felt like the cloud because the memory that it had on there was more than we'd seen in most computers during that time. Remember, I mean, Gateway was a company back then making computers, right? Dell, had their stand-up computers, and I mean, they still kind of do, but but HP Compact, the old school guys that were around the block for quite some time were out doing their thing. But it was wild how, and I want you to kind of get into this before you get into talking about the games and stuff like that. I want you to kind of talk about how console gaming at that time, PlayStation 2, the original Xbox, the GameCube, they were running PC out of town.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, it was cheaper and far easier, and the library, there was not the same level of cross development as you see today. So very different time in the industry. But yeah, the hardware on Xbox was fascinating, I guess is the word at the time, because I've always been a tech guy. I've been into tech. It's where I work in my career. And as I said, by the mid 90s, I was screwing around with PCs. My first PC I bought myself was a compact, to your point. I installed a network card into it to play MMOs like Ultima Online. And, I was just dabbling in anything I could do in terms of gaming and tech. And so, as I said, when the Xbox comes out and it's like, we're going to do broadband, which people forget. Like back then, I remember I was in my first house at the time, and broadband wasn't even really rolled out. Some places had DSL, most places were still on dial-up, but getting a cable internet connection back then was rare and expensive.
Roadrunner.
Yeah. And but broadband, the hard drive, like you said, being able to like just install your music and play music through your speakers while you were playing a game. And even beyond that, I was also always fascinated with home theater. It's another love of mine. So the Xbox was playing games at 1080i, and you eventually could get the pack for the 1080p. And it also had 5.1 surround sound if you had the HD adapter eventually. All of those things in that generation were unique to the Xbox at the time. And so as someone who loved kind of the theater experience and just like pushing the tech of games to what they could be, I just fell in love with the OG Xbox. And then, that's before, and I know Mr. Dark here in the chat mentioned that that's before even dabbling into emulators and being able to install full games or copy games to your hard drive and all the other things you could start to do with your Xbox. You also mentioned System Connect, like LAN parties, which I did many, many times, LAN parties for Halo CE. I would carry, we would carry TVs and Xboxes and set up and link them all together and just have a blast. And yeah, they were. Yes, they were. People don't know how heavy those TVs are. I still have, no joke, right over there behind my basement, I have my 1999 Vega, my Sony Vega flat screen, 32-inch. I always keep it.
Big boy.
It's a big boy. It's like 230 pounds. You go to lift that thing yourself and you'll pull something.
Yeah.
But I always kept it because those TVs they're the best for old school consoles. But anyway, yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of things about the Xbox hardware. The funny thing is that as I have stuff stacked on top of it, boxes of old console, all stacked to the ceiling. That TV doesn't even flex. You know what I mean? It doesn't even move. It's like you can put a house on that TV. It's like the foundation.
Oh, absolutely. So. Absolutely. That thing is built for battle. That thing can go right into war. Right.
So actually a funny story, not to get us off topic, but in my first house, I had my game set up in the basement and a full staircase down into my basement. And me and my buddy were moving that TV, and two of us moving that TV down the steps one day. And he was at the bottom going down, and he went to take that final step, but there was an extra step. Like, he thought there was no steps left, but there was one step. So he kind of lost his balance. The weight of the TV came through. His whole shoulder went straight through my wall. Just because that's how heavy the TV was. So huge hole in my wall just because the TV was like, hey, if you're going, we're going.
That thing fell on. That thing stayed on top of him like a cinder block.
Yeah. But good times, man. But the Xbox, the Xbox is special to me for sure. Definitely one of my top consoles of all time. And it changed the game. It didn't we know it wasn't the best selling console. Right. But it did things for the industry that are undeniable. And I think it's really special for that. Say it again.
It put people on notice.
Yes, absolutely. And it was obviously Microsoft basically saying, "Hey, Sony, and that was the whole point of the console, right? The whole Bill Gates story. You're not going to run away with this because Microsoft was one of the few companies that had the tech and the money to basically throw at the wall to make a statement with it, and they did.
Absolutely, they sure did, man. They changed my life because I mean, I've said this many times on this show and on other shows and stuff like that before, but I used to be one of the cats, unplug, one of the either the white or the red cord and plug in the stereo, so then I could hear a stereo through like the left speaker and the game through the right or something like that, right?
Okay.
And the Xbox took that, so I didn't have to do that anymore, and it just integrated it inside of the game, right? You go to play Sega GT 2002, right? Right when the race starts, like everything's normal, but right when the race starts, 50 Cent kicks on. Right? You know, I'm just like, yeah, let's go. Like, or I turn on NBA or NFL 2K and whatnot, and it's Chris Berman's talking at the beginning, talking about the Rams versus the Eagles game now, and then it goes into the game and it says game brought to you by ESPN's surround sound 5.1. You hear hustling Rick Ross in the background. I'm like, this is wild. I got to set up the music to this game to kick off specifically during this part. I score a touchdown. This song turns on whenever I score a touchdown. This song turns on whenever the quarter ends. This song turns on when there's a timeout. Like the features that the Xbox gave to certain video games was immaculate. It was immaculate. The way that you could balance the sound, you start the fusion frenzy, and then the twisted system starts, and your favorite song kicks on during that, and you're trying to duck and jump as fast as you can. It was just a special time playing Conflict Desert Storm, running through the sand, listening to Tupac. It was just different. And then on top of that, I was like, oh, I don't need this CD selector anymore. I just hook up my Xbox to it.
Yep.
Right? So it really just like changed, as you said earlier, the whole home theater idea, right? The home theater. Like I told this story before. This is a short one. Like my uncle was showing me his 100 disc changer, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was like, yo, bro, I went to Florida and my uncle was showing me his 100 disc changer, and I was just like, yo, you ain't seen nothing. Like I turned on the Xbox and just went to the music category, and I just hit the left stick down and just let it scroll. I was like, you got 100 disc changer, but I got 100 discs on my Xbox.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It was just it just hit different. It was so exciting to show people what the Xbox could do back in that time.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, it was. And I think that I don't know, there's something to be said for that. And I know we'll probably get there, but I think I was actually just talking yesterday. Someone pulled up an old article of mine that I wrote 6 years ago when Xbox Live turned 15, celebrating all the kind of technological achievements that Xbox had brought to the industry. And it's one of the articles I wrote a few years back that kind of gained me a little audience, in the community and whatnot. And just reflecting on that and reflecting on everything that Xbox has done from a technology standpoint for the gaming industry is remarkable. I think that not enough people really give Xbox their flowers for that, because there is just a list. There's a list of things that Xbox originated in the gaming industry. And I think that should be kind of called out and celebrated. And the genesis of that, of course, was the original Xbox. I mean, there's several things, as we've just talked through, right out of the gate that they did before even getting to the 360.
Right.
I would also say one of my favorite games that is underappreciated today and completely forgotten is Kung Fu Chaos. One of the most fun games on the original Xbox. Most people don't remember it. It was kind of like a Super Smash Brothers type game, but it was 4 players on the same screen, but you were in a B Kung Fu movie, and it had this hilarious old school Kung Fu voiceover. So you would have your battle and battle it all out, and the stages would change, and then afterwards it would show it back with an announcer, like an old Kung Fu movie. And it was one of the funniest and coolest ideas. I still have my copy today. I wish they would bring it back. It was, I forget the name of the team, something Monsters, but the development studio is long gone now. But it was an amazing game.
Yeah, man. There was just so many wild games brought up back then, but that's the part of the console I want to talk, or the part of this subject I want to talk about now, which are the games. So
Yeah.
you brought up one that was really special to you, Kung Fu Chaos. You had talked about how special Halo was for you.
Yeah.
Maybe let's dabble into that now. Let's talk about Halo
Okay.
just for a quick minute, because you said
Be
Halo is
careful,
life.
because I can talk Halo forever. So careful what you wish for.
All right, I'm walking in. You told me, you already gave me, I hit the charger. I signed the EULA. Like we are here. We are ready to go. So go on ahead, speak about Halo. Tell me what it was in particular that made you a Halo stan.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we all know. I mean, there's a lot of people like me in the sense of that you kind of get into first-person shooters. So you have Wolfenstein 3D back in the early 90s, right? Kind of originates the concept. Used to play that in school, and then Doom comes along, changes the industry. I built my first PC, bought my first PC because of Doom, and just incredible, right? And then you get into the late 90s, and you start to see GoldenEye, right, and Perfect Dark on the N64, and all the not LAN parties, all the split screen, competition with GoldenEye at the time was incredible. And all of that led up to playing Halo CE for the first time, which just took like, if those games were basically peeking through the door, like Halo CE basically blew the hinges off, right? It kind of changed the idea of what a first person shooter could be, not only in general, but on console in particular, right? And so you get this dual stick aiming, you get this cool kind of sci-fi story that had some super soldier / alien elements. You get these crazy weapons, like first seeing the Needler, right, or the plasma pistol. And then on top of all that, instead of shooters had always been, or mostly been, I should say, like corridors, right? They were hallway shooters, corridor shooters. And GoldenEye kind of expanded on that a little bit, right, with some slightly bigger open areas, but nothing like Halo. And then adding in the vehicle play and just, the map design and the competitiveness. It was just phenomenal. And and the whole Halo just, it completely encapsulated my mind from first playing it. Like I said, went and got an Xbox that night because it had just launched. And I, like I said, didn't plan on getting it, and pretty much played Halo nonstop. I have beat Halo CE beginning to end more times than I could possibly count. LAN parties, and then of course that leads into what Halo would become, still on the OG Xbox with Halo 2 and the initiation of Xbox Live and what Halo 2 did for multiplayer gaming, competitive gaming. It's just, those games were revolutionary in many ways, and I have been a die-hard Halo fanatic since that point, since day one. And I will always adore Halo. It means the world to me. Hell, I'm sitting here in my HCS hat right now, but it is, there's just so many things that Halo did that just weren't being done anywhere else at the time. It's really special.
No doubt. And you had just mentioned, Halo 2 just a moment ago, and how that introduced online to the Halo world and whatever,
and lobbies and game chat and the ranking system and true skill. I mean, there's just, the list goes on.
So with that happening, and you having the history that you did with System Link, carrying TVs, breaking your back just to bust somebody else's ass, right? Now you don't even have to pick up your TV anymore, right?
Yep.
You just sit at home. You're already a big fan of playing games online. As you were saying, you got the network adapter to be able to play like Ultima and stuff like that on your compact back in the day. Trying to stay on I'm trying to stay on keep this conversation going on. Remember what you had said. So you had already did all that, so you were already kind of indebted to the game when it came to when it came to online playing.
And Dreamcast. I played a lot of Dreamcast
online. And Dreamcast. You were talking about that, especially with like Sega Sports and stuff like that. So now Now Halo was brought to the scene. They got the Ethernet too, so the internet's fast, right? You're able to find matches quicker. The action is insane. People hopping into warthogs, hopping out. People, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. These crazy maps and stuff like that. Talk to me about what it was like entering into the Xbox Live scene for the first few times for you. What was that experience like? Just like being like, yo, I'm connected.
Yeah, man. I've talked about it a bunch, but I was an Xbox Live beta tester. I still have my beta kit upstairs. First playing online on Xbox Live was special. I was already on with Dreamcast, but hooking up the broadband. And at the time when Halo 2 came out, my love for Halo was already solidified with CE. But when 2 came out in 2004, by that point I was in my first house. I had a dedicated kind of gaming section set up. I was fully prepared, already had the broadband, the cable internet set up and ready to go. So Halo 2's launch was for me like one of those moments in history that I will never forget. It was seminal, really. I mean, it not only.
Let me ask you real quick before you finish explaining, because I must ask you this now, or else I'm gonna forget, or we're just gonna go so past the part of the conversation that it won't be relevant anymore.
Yeah.
Why was this more special than the network adapter or getting online with the Dreamcast? Because keep in mind, I remember those back in the day. I remember screwing in the adapter in the back of the PS2 and stuff like that.
Yep.
In those moments were special as hell.
Yes.
Not taking anything away from it, right?
Yeah.
I just want to know, why was the Xbox One special?
Yeah, the biggest reason why Live was so special is the voice chat. I mean, that is critical to understanding the evolution of what Xbox brought, right? So before, I met a bunch of people on SegaNet, and I still have, like I said, my keyboard and everything, and you would type and all that. But just having a standardized, everyone who had an Xbox Live kit to play on Xbox Live had a mic. It came with it. So standardizing voice chat was huge. And of course, when Halo 2 comes out, it has lobbies. And as we all remember those classic days of lobbies, where everyone's got a mic and everyone's talking, or a lot of people are talking, it was chaos. It was chaos oftentimes in a really good way, because I like to tell people, like, nowadays you're in your voice party, you're in your Discord chat, you're in whatever, your private chat, right? And in my experience, very few people go to game chat anymore and talk. You can find someone here and there, but it's pretty rare, and a lot of times you don't want to. Right. But the initial days, the beta days to those early days of Xbox Live were just so special, because it felt like, and maybe this is anecdotal, I don't know, but it just felt like everyone who was on and talking was so invested and fascinated with what was just happening, just being able to do it.
Yeah, it was like Harold and Kumar finally got the White Castle moment, right? It was like,
it didn't even matter if the burger was any good. It was going to be delicious because of, you know what I mean? Like, and it's the same thing. It was just like, hey, what's up? Where are you? Like, oh, I'm in, I was living outside of Philadelphia at the time. So I was like, oh, I'm outside of Philadelphia. Oh, I'm in Florida. It's like, oh shit, and it's just like, it was a really kind of, it was the best way I've described it before. It was the arcade experience of the early to mid 90s, where everyone in the arcade, and I've said this many times, I love having this conversation, is doesn't matter what you look like, where you came from, how much money you have, what you do. None of that matters. You were in the arcade, you were playing Street Fighter, talking crap, or Mortal Kombat, or whatever it was, and you were either working together or you were competing, but either way, you were all one gaming community.
Right.
And I love that. And the early days of Xbox Live felt like that. It felt like nothing else matters other than the fact that you're literally sitting somewhere in your living room or wherever playing a game with someone else. And it's revolutionary. And everyone just kind of reveled in the fact that it was happening at all. And those experiences and memories not only will I never forget, but I think Halo 2 was the perfect crossroad of that early day of Xbox Live where it was still fresh and new and cool, but you had this revolutionary game over here as at the same time, and they came together. And I think it was just a really special time in gaming history. Probably one of my favorite times in gaming history.
Absolutely, man. It was pretty nutty time thinking like this is like you said, there was internet and gaming already, right? There was internet and gaming for several years.
Yeah, for a while actually.
Right.
Yeah, internet online gaming started, way before that, honestly.
But being able to communicate to the person that you were fighting against or playing with, or whatever that be it just completely changed the way you even look at it, and really the way you even thought about how you're gonna like use your day and stuff like that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And competition too. Like, I think that's an important point to call out. Like, that's where, at least for me, like crap talk and shit talking really kind of started up, because you would be in a lobby, everyone would talk together, and then you would go into the game
on your couch now.
Exactly right. So you go in the game and you're on your team, and then you win or lose, you get back to the lobby, and then that's when you're saying, oh, I'll get you next game, because those lobbies would stay together, and you would have nights where you would just go back and forth with people, and like, oh, you better come find me at Top Tower and Ivory Tower. I'm gonna snipe your head off. You know what I mean? And you would just that's where it all that's just where it all kind of started, and it just you would get, of course, you would get the a-holes and stuff like that, right? But I think there was a lot of good sportsmanship at the time, again, because it was so fresh, it was so new, and it was so kind of revolutionary at the time. It was a lot of fun, man. We spent endless nights. That was, to your point, that was pretty much when I wasn't working or doing something with my girlfriend at the time. That's all I was doing, man. That's all I was doing.
I mean, I really miss how easy it used to be to rematch people.
Yeah, just stay together and we're gonna run it again. That's it.
Yeah, sometimes it'd be like 10 games straight of rematching the same folks over and over. And like sometimes you were the one holding the L, and sometimes you just couldn't stop giving L's to other people, and they just kept coming back, and you're like, oh, you want another round of this? Come on over and go get yourself another slice.
And either you were letting them hear it or they were letting you hear it. And I don't know. Obviously there were times it got heated and all the other stuff, but it was something special, man. You don't get that experience now, at least in my experience. Like, sometimes I'll play Halo solo, and I play competitive. Usually I'm in ranked, and I will put on a mic and just see if anyone's talking. And it's pretty rare. And if you do, it's very kind of it's very like formal. It's like you talk about that match where the players are, and then you're like, okay, bye. And it's expected now. Like, everyone has this technology. It's not unique or different or anything else. Everyone's playing games. Everyone's online. Everyone can talk to whoever they want to talk to, in gaming or outside of gaming, anytime they want. We're talking about the days back then before cell phones, really, or cell phones were early. You're talking about the old Nokias and stuff, and it was a different era, very different era to today. And I don't think, that'll never be replicated again, because the technology is past that point now. You know what I mean?
It's way too far.
Yeah.
At this point. If we're replicating it ever, it's because there is a serious fall in humanity, right?
Post Fallout Shelter. Yeah.
Facts. But now moving from that, we got to talk about the next big deal, or actually the next generation, right? So let's go on ahead and get into the 360, Wii, and PS3, right? And how big of a deal those were, because now it wasn't like the PlayStation 1 generation where PlayStation's coming out, everybody else is just tucking their tail, leaving. Now Xbox is like, yo, we see the light at the end of the tunnel with the original Xbox. Now we're coming at your neck
Yeah,
with
they did.
with the 360, and they shot first.
Yes,
Right?
they did.
They took the
A full
first
year almost. Yeah.
they took the first shot, and it was a hot one.
Yep.
And
Yes.
Gears of War was one of the big deals to come to that console. I want you first, before we even get into the 360 and the PS2, or not PS2, the PS3 stuff. I want you to tell me, where were you at when it came to the Wii?
The Wii? So the Wii is one of the very few, what I would call, gaps in my gaming history. Not really a gap, because I did have one at one point in time, and I did play games on it. I still have some games today, but a gap in the sense of I had incredibly little interest in the Wii. Post GameCube, as I already said, Xbox took over with Halo. We just went through all of Halo 2 and Xbox Live, and I was so tech focused at the time and so fascinated by technology and how it was changing gaming, and so invested in Halo and the Xbox community and what PlayStation was doing, that by time we get to 2005, when the 360 has come out and changes the game entirely again, which we'll talk about, when the Wii comes out, I have no interest in it, just none. So it didn't.
I was saying.
Yeah, it just didn't do anything for me. So yeah, I mean, I've played it. I had one. I sold it many years ago. But it just, that's probably one of the systems, at least modern systems, I played the least out of any.
Yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it was the grandma's toy. Like, to be honest, I really did, because it was just like literally anybody can play this, and like, not that anything is wrong with that at all by any means. It's just like, they're just, I don't know. It just felt like it was kind of gimmicky for me, where it's like, oh, swing around your wand, and you know, some of the games will be pretty good, but a lot of the third-party games don't even want to deal with it.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And that's where that's where kind of it felt like Nintendo decided that their console, not that they hadn't before in various ways, but their console was not going to be competing in the tech space anymore, right? It was going to be functionality wise, and they kind of really went back into their first party only. It's kind of the Genesis. I keep saying Genesis, but it's kind of the beginnings of what we know Nintendo as today. It's almost like a closed ecosystem, where it wasn't always that way, right, with Nintendo. And it just, the Wiimote didn't do much for me. Obviously the Galaxy games are incredible, and it's still got some incredible games, but it just, it didn't interest me.
Okay. So now let's go on ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of it. So the PS3, 360, they take the glove off and slap them in the face first, right?
Yeah.
And it was like an open-handed slap, even though it was a glove, right? It hurt. It did not feel very good. So I want you to tell me what it was like for you as a gamer, you yourself personally. What was it like seeing the 360 come out, knowing that, Xbox kind of had you by the cojones last generation, right?
Yeah, 360 was like, I would say in terms of launches, the 360 launch was probably the most memorable for me. Maybe Dreamcast, but 360 probably top, those two. Because of what, again, like talking about what Xbox was doing with tech and knowing what we knew about the 360. And so you had the 360 in this kind of space of moving technology forward again, taking everything we were already beginning to love with what Xbox brought to the ecosystem, and then saying, okay, we're coming out first. We're coming out with this super powerful machine. It's going to have all these features. Everyone's going to have an Xbox Live account, because remember, Xbox Live was just growing on a curve at that point. Even if you weren't being in the paid yet, Xbox Silver, right? You had this new Blades dashboard. Everything was HD. It's the first HD console, like full, 720p versus 1080i, those types of things. And there was so much about it that was fascinating to me. And I went to midnight launch for Xbox 360 with a friend of mine, and I bought 6 games. So we bought Xbox 360, 6 games. We came back to my house after midnight launch, and we played, I think, past noon the next day, straight. And it was just like the promise of that console and what it was going to do for gaming was incredible. And that's before you even got to Gears of War, Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, all that stuff. But it was the next revolution in terms of power and technology in the console space. And I was fascinated by it. And that's, what it did over the next several years. I still say to this day that no console has done more for consoles in general than the 360. It was the first in many ways. You talk about, even Major Nelson has talked about this being the first digital storefront, and Summer of Arcade and standardized, like I said, online live profiles and achievements, right? They literally the first achievements. Just all of these various things that were done, you talk about like game show, like 1 vs 100 and live interactive games. And there's just the list is endless of what 360 did for the gaming landscape. And it's remarkable. I absolutely love the 360. It is it's top 5 for me in terms of console. I obviously have played many consoles over the years, but it's way up there, and its launch is something that'll always be special as well.
No doubt. So, of course I, figured that you had a 360, but now I got to ask, where were you at when it came to the, PS3 and whatnot? Because, seeing that the Xbox came out last generation with the internal hard drive, now the PS3 has an internal hard drive.
Yep.
You've seen, the ability to, put a multimedia onto your onto your console is now available in the PS3. Now they have a Blu-ray as well, which the Xbox did not have. It ended up with, the HD DVD thing that ended up getting phased out fairly quickly. But the PlayStation 3 also had, the 6-axis controller that was extremely new during that time. Had Wi-Fi as well as up to 1080p via HDMI. Right. So like it had a lot of new features onto the PS3 as well. And I'm interested, did you end up getting one sometime within that generation?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I think obviously we all know about the pricing and the messaging about the PS3. And I think, the perfect storm kind of affected me there too, with 360 coming out a year earlier and me absolutely adoring the 360. So I was super well invested into the 360 kind of ecosystem and all the games on the Xbox side. So the PS3 at launch, especially for $500 and $600 at the time, didn't interest me as much. The Blu-ray drive, I wanted to see what that could do for games. But again, at the time, people may forget now, but at the time, we didn't know what was going to win out between HD, DVD, and Blu-ray. That was one of those format battles that we've experienced so many times. So I waited until, in fact, as usual, I still have it.
Fight between the movie industries and who wanted to rock with
which
what.
What always happens there is porn comes along and kind of tells people what the format's going to be.
We're doing it here. Okay, we concede.
That's it. But I bought the PS3 Metal Gear Solid bundle. So I had a normal PS3. I think I had one used, or I got one from a friend. I don't remember. But the one I bought was the Metal Gear Solid 4 bundle. And I still have it today. I enjoyed the PS3, but there were a lot of things I didn't like about the PS3. I don't like the DualShock controller. Controller drove me nuts.
6-axis?
No, it did nothing for me. No, I didn't like the thumbsticks.
You were
Nah, didn't do it for me. Didn't do it.
Fair enough. Okay.
the price, of the system itself was prohibitive. And then because of Halo, right, and those kind of multiplayer shooters, especially once you get to 2007 and Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4 hit, never mind, people forget nowadays, BioShock and the original Mass Effect were exclusive to 360. And those are two of my favorite games of all time. So I had so much invested over here, and then you add in the competitive gaming space and not liking, one, they didn't have Halo, but two, they didn't really have any competitive shooter, because I wasn't a SOCOM guy at the time, but they didn't really have any competitive shooter, nor the controller I like to really interact with. Like, I spent the vast majority of my time on the 360 versus the PS3. But there are still experiences I, obviously enjoyed on the PS3. Like I said, I still have it. Metal Gear Solid 4 was the first Metal Gear that really, really clicked with me. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to forget now a bunch of games, I'm sure. But that's when Uncharted really kind of came onto the scene, and, franchises like that I really enjoyed as well.
War. But absolutely. So the PS3, it just wasn't hitting.
I think you're on mute, dude, or I can't hear you. Is it just me?
No,
there you go. There you go. I got you.
It's weird because it said it wasn't muted for me. But anyway,
strange.
So but anyways, but yeah, no, I was saying like God of War was was a big deal back then for sure as well. And towards the end of that generation, everybody knows, or everybody that follows gaming knows, like they started to really pump out games with like The Last of Us. Obviously, the rest of the Uncharted that ended up came out. Infamous was a big deal as well. They had some other really good, third party exclusive deals that they had. As you were talking about, like Metal Gear Solid was a big deal over there. The
tail end of the PS3 generation is where you could see the arc really start into the PS4, right? Like they were setting themselves up. Yeah.
Right. So let's go on ahead and actually jump into that one. So like the PS4, and I'm going to make this part kind of quick because I want to wrap it up and get into the current stuff and ask you a few questions about your content creating and whatnot before we get up out of here. So I want to wrap up this back end of the history of gaming, since we're pretty much there already, but PS4, Xbox One, what was that like for you, especially seeing the messaging that Xbox was kind of putting out with, they like we talked about how cool it was to be the all home theater thing.
Yeah.
And here they are going into it, but some people are starting to be like, yo, you're getting a little too home theaterly and not so much focusing on the reason that I'm on your platform, which is game first.
Yeah.
Where were you at with that whole ideology that was kind of being spread?
Yeah, I'm in the minority. I was a defender of it. Some people like to say now because of the history of it. Well, no, I always knew it wasn't going to succeed. No, I'll be honest with you. I was into it. I used my Kinect every day. I spoke to it. Did the Xbox record that? And I had my TV plugged into it. I would use Xbox. I would use the Kinect for fitness. So Xbox Fitness, people may remember, they had fitness routines you could do on camera that would study like your heart rate and your thing, your body alignment and stuff like that. I really enjoyed it. And then, obviously the market said otherwise. But I was still on board with Xbox at that point. The dashboard wasn't great, right? And they revised that, as we know, many, many times since. But I kind of liked what Xbox was trying to do with the tech. I think the ideas weren't necessarily the problem. The execution was, which is what often gets a lot of things into trouble, honestly. Because if you think about what the Xbox One was trying to do in 2013, a lot of it is done now. They just didn't execute very well on it. And I think the Force Connect was probably the biggest mistake. I get what they were trying to do, but, it was very successful as a peripheral add-on, but as a Force bundle, you know, it kind of we know we don't have to cover it. So I was on board with it. I liked it, but I absolutely understand why on a mass market appeal across different countries it didn't really vibe as well. And of course, kind of like the 360 to PS3 reversed in PS4, Xbox One. PS4 kind of did everything right from a gamer's perspective. You had a powerful console, you had the cheaper price, you had that kind of first party game and third party game arc from the tail end of the PS3 generation leading into the PS4 generation. And as we know, the rest is history. The PS4 kind of, you know, just took off and got back to Sony in its dominating ways in many aspects.
Yeah, I will always be an avid defender of the Xbox Snap function.
Actually, yeah. All right. Well, there's two of us out there at the bare minimum, anyway.
Oh man, I don't care if you guys bring back the. I mean, because I absolutely love the HDMI in.
Yeah, I used the snap function. I'd be playing a game while having like my, you know, I'm a big hockey guy, so watching the LA Kings, I would have like the Kings game on while playing a game. I love that stuff, man.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I'd have like my computer plugged into it and you know, have like a show going on, or like you said, like be watching the football game, have YouTube like music video compilation going off to the side while playing Titanfall.
Yeah, like man. It's a good time.
I was, you know, like it was dope, and the Kinect was pretty cool. It was interesting the way it was used in some of the video games, like sports games. Like you throw a pass and it gets intercepted and whatnot, and you're just, you know, yelling at your team, "That's some bullshit!" And you get like a flag on the play for yelling at your TV, or like you get a tech in the NBA game for yelling at the ref or something like that. Like that stuff, it was pretty cool. It reminded you that it was listening. But yeah, I'll always be a defender of the snap function of it.
Yeah, man.
I really was a big fan of some of that new stuff that they were putting into it. But as you're right, like, you know, they just didn't follow through on a lot of what they said. And also being the first one out there sometimes to do something and be kind of wishy-washy about it at the same time is just as, or sometimes more painful than just standing your ground, right? So like they were really wishy-washy on how, you know, the ownership of games are, right?
Yep.
But look at what Ubisoft is saying now and stuff like that, right? Like Ubisoft is out there saying straight up, like, get used to not owning your games. And it's like, yo, Xbox back then was, they weren't talking about like not owning the games, but they were just saying like you ain't sharing that shit. Right? And then DRM, right? They were the big ones to come out talking about DRM. Now look at the industry. Every single gaming console right now has DRM in some sort of way. So Xbox has consistently been a company willing, sometimes to their own detriment, to come out first with something, take all the blowback for somebody else to do the exact same thing, just tweaked a little bit and look like a champion.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens across tech industries all the time, as we know, right? Like
with the whole Xbox One, the snap function. When the PS5 first came out, everybody was like, "Oh, you can watch other people play their games. You got this picture in picture," and I'm just like, "Not new."
Yeah,
like some of this stuff isn't all new, but it's interesting that we don't like it when it's brought so sudden, or it's not a normal thing in the industry yet. Microsoft likes to kind of play with people's feelings when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, force change too. Like if you're Apple has kind of gone down that path many times, where if you're going to force change on people, it has to be well executed. And I think that, you know, that's where Xbox failed. They were trying to force change. They thought they were powerful enough and they became arrogant enough to think they could force change in the gaming industry, and then they didn't execute well on it. And we know the rest is history. It came back to bite them. But I still enjoyed the Xbox One launch and era. I went to that midnight launch too. I always enjoyed that era. I was one of those that had the Kinect still hooked up to my One X with the adapter, just because I really still enjoyed using the Kinect. But it's gone now. But yeah, those were good times.
I mean, I hated that they made you get the adapter for it. I remember I was so mad. I went to go plug it in the first time, and I was like, what do I do?
Yeah, no doubt.
But anyways, so moving to the current generation now, because I didn't want to, like I said, I didn't want to stick around that last one too much. But current generation, now we have the Series S and X, and we have the PS5, we have the Switch. I didn't even want to talk about the Wii U. Skip over that part. But now we have all of these consoles. The Switch has been dominating. It's been dominating since like the late last generation, right?
Yep.
And the PS5 consoles are selling like crazy. Games, meh. Xbox, they got plenty of games now, but it was a very slow snail start for them at for the Series S and X this generation. The way I've been kind of putting it when I'm pitting Xbox versus PlayStation is because I kind of leave Nintendo out of this equation, because they're kind of doing their own thing. But I feel like, and I've said this a lot of times, so if you guys have been sticking around and being around different episodes and whatnot, you've heard me say this before. PlayStation's won 2020, Xbox seemingly won 2021, PlayStation then won 2022, Xbox seemingly, in my eyes, won 2023. Now we're going into 2024 this year right now, and it seems like Xbox is finally being consistent.
Yeah.
And PlayStation is not, surprisingly. Like they still have a lineup of stuff that's coming, but they don't really have the shock and awe that they sometimes have coming into a fresh year with like a first party lineup, I should say, in particular, because they still got shock and awe when it comes to like Final Fantasy, Rise of Ronin, and Stellar Cheeks coming out later on, and all of that stuff, right? Helldivers for some folks that tickles their fancy, but I'm just starting to notice, there's a little bit of a change in PlayStation. Really got, other than Spider-Man, you can say they got abused last year. Like they like the head of the house is leaving. Naughty Dog canceled their game and laid off a bunch of people. Bungie is looking rough. Right? And then their showcases were abysmal to a lot of people. Or maybe not abysmal to some, but it definitely didn't showcase what a lot of people came to see during that time. Like there was a lot of third party stuff at their showcase, and a lot of people were just like, what's PlayStation doing? I could see this, I could see that, I could see what Capcom's new game that looks really hot, Dragon's Dogma 2. Right, but all I come here and see is Spider-Man, which I know is coming out, a handheld and earbuds in a movie. Right, and it's just kind of like
a bad show. It was a bad show.
So with that being said, like, I'm kind of interested in how you feel about the way this generation has unfolded, more or less, for Xbox and PlayStation. Going ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's funny how like the industry seems to ebb and flow. You know what I mean? It's like one's up, one's down, and one's up, one's down. And there's almost, it feels like there's few times where they're both either, I mean, they're rarely both down, but it's few times where they're both just hitting on all their strength, right? Or hitting all their strides. And it's like we had 360 PS3, and then you reverse, and then you reverse again, and it's interesting. I think that I think there's a couple kind of key points. I think that from an Xbox side, many of the Xbox community have been clamoring for, it's all about the games and we need better game cadence and delivery and quality and all those things.
Right.
I mean, I don't have to repeat what we've all said a million times. And I think that, I was in LA in this past June, and I was in the conference, and I was even very fortunate enough to be invited to the private media session with Phil, Sarah, Todd Howard, and Matt Booty. And it was just the four of them on a stage for an hour, kind of talking about the future of Xbox first party and things like that. And in that, it's the first time I've gotten the sense, because I've been in several of those kind of things over the past few years, and it was the first time I got the sense where confidence from Matt Booty and Sarah and Phil uniformly that Xbox is now in a place, after these years that we've been waiting and the acquisitions and everything we've all talked about a million times, where the cadence of first party delivery of a game a quarter is going to be a reality. It was the first time that felt real. And Matt was very clear that as we get into 2024, they already have 4, 5, 6 games on deck for 2024, never mind others that we'll hear about in the future. But he made it very clear and said it distinctly that the goal is a game a quarter, period, from first party. And I think we're seeing that. We just saw it today. I mean, we're recording after the developer direct, right? So we're seeing that come to life, and they're fantastic looking games. The funny thing is that we've been clamoring for Xbox about this for a number of years now, while PlayStation, on and off, for the most part until recently, has been killing it in the game space, especially coming off the PS4 gen. And to your point, we're now in this kind of weird space where it's reverse, where Xbox is killing it on the game front and PlayStation's over here, and we don't have a clue what the hell's going on with PlayStation right now. To your point, we know there's a couple third parties. Rise of the Ronin looks great. Spider-Man hit hard. But from a first party perspective, you kind of have some weird signs. Jim leaves the house. Last of Us Factions gets canceled. And we don't have any really concrete look at to what is coming in the short or even medium term for PS first party, which is a weird feeling. Like, I don't say that out of any, to denigrate Sony or PlayStation at all. That's not me, if anyone knows me. More of just being realistic of, we've gotten so used to over the past, I would say, several years of, generally speaking, PlayStation killing it with first party, even if you like all the games or not, generally speaking, they've kind of killed it.
Right.
We're in this weird space now where it's like, it feels almost like we're in limbo with PlayStation at the moment. And it's just, I don't know, it's an odd place to be. And, I think that it's a unique feeling for PlayStation right now. I'm going to be very interested to see what they do in the coming months, because if we get a state of play or whatever, I'm going to be very interested to see kind of, what they've been cooking up. It's a weird spot.
Well, here's something that's also been kind of weird as of lately. And you can make this argument that all three of the companies are kind of going through this currently, but none more than both Xbox and PlayStation, and that is messaging.
Yeah.
So and so when I say that in particular, I mean PlayStation's messaging this generation with how they're going to roll out games and what is to be expected from there has been kind of mixed, right? Sometimes it seems like they nail it, and then other times it's kind of like it feels like we're waiting 6 to 8 months for them to even say anything. Like, come on, speak, please.
Yeah.
As for Xbox, it almost seems like their messaging is almost that of a riddle. like they almost seem like the Riddler, where it's like, you just found this clue in the locker. Now meet me on 137th and Maple to figure out the next piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
And also, do you really want to know?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Right.
I think that's part of it. Like, I think they're after the Xbox One generation, I think they're so sensitive about the way they communicate things. It gets them in trouble because sometimes they are hesitant to say certain things. Simultaneously, Microsoft is such a giant, right, in the world. I mean, the highest valuation of any company in history. So there's so many people within the Microsoft organization, from Satya to Amy Hood to other chief financial officers and other officers, that speak in various capacities around Xbox as a business unit. And then Xbox leadership themselves having, a lot of people that are customer facing, if you will. Because if you think about Nintendo and you think about PlayStation, they don't have those executive level people that are out there talking to their fans and customers all the time.
Right.
They just don't. Their reports come out of their quarterly financial fiscal results, and you can kind of get an inkling of what they're doing there in their presentations. But Xbox has always been kind of out in the forefront, and they interact with the community, which I think is something we love about them. At least I do.
Right.
And I really appreciate that. But it comes with the unfortunate result that because you have so many more people talking about the brand, what the brand is doing, what the future of the brand is, at times those messages are going to conflict. And how they tackle that, and how Phil or Satya or whoever, tackles that, has always seemingly been a challenge in these last few years. So they're at that place again. And I think that's even compounded further by the fact that the industry is changing rapidly, development costs are rising rapidly. There's all these factors factoring into, at the end of the day, Xbox is a business as part of the richest company in the world, and they need to put the money on the sheet. And how do we accomplish that while simultaneously making sure we don't piss off our hardcore fans that we've since gained back from the Xbox One fiasco? You know what I mean? So it's a very complicated thing, honestly, when it comes down to it. It sounds simple, communicate clearly, but when you take in all the different factors at play, I could see it being a challenge.
Yeah, and it almost seems like sometimes something that they had said that people champion, they end up hating that exact same thing later. So and here's what I mean by that. I find it wild that when we were acquired, I don't know why I said we. When Xbox was acquiring Activision Blizzard, right? The whole shtick behind it was Call of Duty ain't going nowhere. We knew that, right? In fact, it's going to be going to Nintendo. It's now going to Nvidia for the GeForce experience and stuff like that, right? It's doing more than before, right? The whole thing on the like when they walked in the door, they were like, "Hey, we're trying to third party publish with this company."
Yeah.
Everybody was like, "Yeah, get them." And we're going to make sure that you guys get your games too. No problem. We're going to do that. And now that Microsoft got them, and they're like, "Hey, just letting everybody know that we're going to be making some games for Nintendo and PlayStation." Everybody now that was just championing that is like, "Xbox, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How could you do this to us? What are you thinking? You're going third party." And it's like, but you just said that they should get them.
Yeah.
And some even use the argument that, hey, it would be dumb to rip that stuff off of there because they're making easy money back to then be able to put into their own ecosystem to then continue to make great games.
Yeah. Yep.
So I find it ironic that some people are just like shocked that this is now the direction that they're going. And that's what I mean by people championing something, and that same something they hate. when it actually comes to fruition.
I think it's a lack of evolving. I agree with you. And I think it's a lack of evolving your perspective, not you, but people, their perspective on what Xbox is, right? And maybe that's because Xbox for years, especially if you're a hardcore Xbox fan, was struggling to find that first party solutions and the games and recognition for exclusives and all these things that have been thrown around for years. Xbox has evolved rapidly in the past 5 years, right? With all these acquisitions and mergers and everything else. And with that, you have to evolve your concept of what Xbox is. Xbox is not that company that is fighting with the Xbox One to get some exclusives to pull people from PS4 anymore. That's not what the gaming industry is today. That's not what Xbox is today. So I think to your exact point of now that they own Bethesda and they own ABK and all of those studios are Xbox first party, you've got to reevaluate your expectations of what it means for Xbox games to be on other platforms, because it's a reality. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what games, when, all the details, but that doesn't matter. The overall point stands is that you can't come into the new environment in 2024 and beyond and saying all Xbox games need to stay on Xbox consoles. It's just not realistic.
Fair enough. And I got to ask you, since we are on this topic, like, how do you personally feel? And I got to throw this out there as well. I got to ask you first to kind of warm up the way I asked this question. Have you ever met like Phil, Sarah, Aaron, or any of the?
I've met all of them.
Okay, so you met the ladies and gentlemen over there at Xbox and some of the folks over at Microsoft, same company.
Yeah. I had dinner with Jason Ronald in June. He's awesome dude, man. Talking to him, super bright.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, with the messaging and everything that we just got done talking about, how sometimes the message was clear, you just didn't like the outcome kind of situations happen. I've got to also wonder, like, when they come out and say some of this stuff and they see people talking about it, right? They see some folks frustrated. They see fanboys fanboying, doing what they do, right?
Yeah.
And then you see others that are like, I see what you're doing. I get it. I would probably do it too if I was the leader of a company. Like some people that have kind of a business mindset that kind of get that this train that's moving doesn't have a heart. It only has, what you put into it, right? It's a machine. It's not really an actual person. It doesn't have feelings. You're not going to hurt its feelings by saying it's
Yeah.
So with that being said, and you see all of the commotion around it, and you said you have met people that work there and stuff like that, I got to ask, like, do you think that some of the reason that they don't say anything is because people are talking about it?
I don't know. I think it's a fair question. I think that at least in the conversations I've had, right? As I said, it may not look like it to us, but they are kind of very careful in how they attempt to communicate. And they are acutely aware. I know this for a fact. They're acutely aware of the conversations that go on the social spaces, on podcasts, all the stuff we talk about. But I think they also understand, and I think what may be lost on some of us or some of the gaming community at times is that the gaming community that lives on Twitter and Threads and in these podcasts that we all know and have been on together, they are a massive, massive minority, right? In terms of the market space for Xbox as a brand. And so they are both simultaneously aware and thankful for the passionate fans like us and others who, live and breathe this stuff all the time. But they are also aware of just sad of the matter of the fact of how little it means to the bottom line. And so I think when you're in that position, and at this point, I'm just guessing, but if you're in that executive position, obviously you're making decisions and communicating from a brand perspective for a global audience. And if that sometimes either pisses people off that are your super hardcore passionate fans, or doesn't make every single person happy, it's just a necessary part of the business. And they may even come out to a stage or a prompt or whatever and read something that they know ahead of time is not going to be wildly liked. They know that, right? Because they're, like I said, they're acutely aware of what people are saying and thinking. But it's either what's best for the business from their perspective, or, was a directive from someone, be it Phil, be it Microsoft, whatever it may be. It's something that they have to do. So I don't think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what I know of the people I've met and talked to in the conversations I've had is the stuff we talk about, we're not talking about things like saying, why doesn't Xbox think of this? Believe me, they've thought of it. They knew it well before you thought of it. And they know that you're talking about it. But for whatever reason in their eyes, that's not what is most important to worry about.
So so I guess what I'm asking, let me put it in because you answered a good chunk of that question, but I'm kind of interested in getting a specific response, and I'm not going to tell you what type of response I'm looking for.
Okay.
See if you give it to me or not. So I'm wondering if you ever think that there's a moment where it feels like, oh man, I gotta hop on and say something about this, and Satya's like, yo, no, let it cook. Let it cook. Don't say nothing.
Yeah.
You see these folks are, up in arms a little bit. They're actually talking about it more than they were last week. Let it cook.
I see what you mean.
Do you think there's any of that kind of going on?
I don't know. My guess would be maybe a little. I would have to think. I don't know. I can't speak to a specific instance, right? But my guess would be, because they know of the conversations going on, there's probably been times where they let things just ride out to see how it evolves. You know what I mean? That would be my guess.
Fair enough. All right. So I got your impression on that. I got your impression on kind of Sony and how they're kind of doing what they're doing right now. Before we get into asking you, briefly about, how you started your content creation and whatnot, I just got to ask you, Switch 2024, is that happening? New Switch?
Yes, we will see the new Switch this year.
And do you think it's going to be worth dropping everything and getting right now? Or do you think it's going to be one of those things where it's like, I should wait for some games to come out for it?
Depends how they implement it, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to blow the doors off, where if you're a tech person that owns a high-end Steam Deck or a ROG Ally or anything like that, you're going to jump at. But I think if you're someone who really enjoys the Switch today, especially, goes without saying, Nintendo's games, right, that you're going to be in a better place to play those games. And I think that the experience will be better. So it's, the functionality that you can get from the Switch today will remain. But if you want to play on a slightly bigger screen at a better resolution, better frame rate, all the things we know from the other console upgrades, there you go. That's how you'll do it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so now going into like how you got into this position, even I want you to kind of take me back,
okay,
just a little bit, and I want you to ask, or not ask, but tell me, like, when you were sitting around playing like your Dreamcast, or the Sega Saturn, when you happen to get it late, or better yet, even the even like the earlier like Genesis or Super Nintendos, did you ever think, when I get older, I'm gonna be part of gaming in some sort of
um, not in this capacity, no. I think back then, the idea of content creation wasn't a thing. So, if you wanted to kind of get into writing about gaming, you went into journalism because that's what it was, right? It was magazines. And then when by time the whole website and forum and, that era came about, I was already in a career. So no, I wouldn't say I ever had any aspirations. I did originally go to college for computer science, and in my late high school and early college days, I did a lot of coding. So I did develop some very simple video games and, used to code with friends and stuff like that. So I had dabbled in that space of potentially getting into development. But just the way my life worked out and just the way my career took off, it never became anything more than that.
Okay. So then then at what point were you like, yo, I need to record a video for this, or I need to like write something like this experience that I just had transformed my, need for being part of this community even further?
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up obviously with the magazines and stuff we were talking about, right? The classics. And I always liked specifically Next Generation magazine. Because Next Generation, if you don't know, was kind of considered the mature gaming magazine where it talked about how the consoles worked and like what they were built with. You got to understand, back in the early days of consoles, you didn't really talk about the chips that were in them. That wasn't a thing often. So
all
Next Generation
processing, that's all we knew.
Yeah, exactly. Keywords and buzzwords, right? which generally meant not a lot. So Next Generation did, they would talk to developers. They would talk about hardware and things. And I found that fascinating, why I got into computers and all that. So anyway, I bring that up to say, like, by the 2000s-ish, I started writing about games on forums. So I was part of the early IGN forums and part of probably gaming forums I don't even remember nowadays. But I just thought, like, I used to love these kind of detailed magazines, and what we were getting out of coverage at the time was like very higher level coverage. And I wanted to write about certain aspects a little deeper, a little more meaningful. So I started, I think at the time, like I did a long form review of Mass Effect 1, BioShock, and a few others back in like 2007, 2008. And I was doing this in a gaming sub forum. And I did that for a few years, and I got a lot of compliments on my writing style and kind of the way I talked about games just from people I knew. And so by like 2013-ish, maybe 14, something like that, when Xbox One was coming around, I found myself talking and writing about games a lot again. Like it was becoming a big part of my day-to-day routine. And my some friends said, well, why don't you do this somewhere else? You know what I mean? Like not on a sub forum. Why don't you create something to talk about games or do this more
professional?
And my wife kind of talked about it too. And it was like, all right, so that's kind of how the idea kind of germinated, if you will, for Season Gaming, because two things. One, it was a way for me to just put my thoughts out there and my writings or whatever I wanted to do in a dedicated space. And then the other thing is, I really didn't like the direction that a lot of the discourse was beginning to go as YouTube was taking off and, magazines were kind of dying out a little bit. But I didn't like the direction of the whole fanboy stuff. I didn't like how saying negative things just for clicks or insulting developers or saying games are trash. Like, you know what I mean? The stuff we deal with a lot today. I just didn't like that. It didn't do anything for me.
The thoughtless provoking.
Yeah, exactly. Just doing stuff for clicks and, to get attention. And I was like, dude, like, as we've obviously talked through now for a while, games were a very big part of my life and a very positive, meaningful part of my life. And that camaraderie of being a gamer through my life has always been a great thing. And seeing how sites and channels and whatever was popping up were just like, yeah, we're gonna kind of take a crap on all of that for attention, didn't sit well with me. I just didn't like it. And so I created Season Gaming as a way to not only put my thoughts in a dedicated space, but the tenets behind it were always to approach gaming from a positive, mature aspect. We're going to talk about games, we're going to celebrate developers, and we're going to celebrate what gaming does positively for people in their lives. And we're not going to go down the road of doing stuff for clicks. We're not going to dabble in the argumentative nonsense that people get into. That's just not what we're going to do. So that's how it kind of came about originally.
Okay. So where did you end up building? So obviously that like kickstarted it.
Yeah.
Was there something prior to Season Gaming that you were part of regularly?
Yeah, I was on multiple forums. I don't even remember them all. I'll be honest with you. I had an IGN account on those forums. There was Game Facts, there was Games Radar, different forums essentially that I was a member of and would talk to people consistently on. And then there was a game I ran I adminned a car forum. I told you earlier I like cars. I adminned a car forum, and within that car forum, we had a gaming sub forum that I created, and we had a community there that I basically was a moderator and admin for, that had quite a few people on it. And there are some of the people that encouraged me to go start my own thing.
Okay. And then so after you found yourself with some of those, and you started to be like, you know what, I kind of like this. This is nice. Your hobbies coming more to life. Things are unfolding. You're starting to find an appreciation into your hobby that you didn't really have prior, right? Or like, you're willing to work on something that nobody really is forcing you to do, right?
Yeah.
So while that is happening, I'm wondering, like, from going to the forums and then starting up Season Gaming, what was it first like for you realizing, I'm starting to kind of put some of this on my back? I want to do this for, I don't want to do it for this side or for that side. I want to make my own thing. What was it like starting out for you?
It was tough. I think what was interesting is SG started, no joke. I had no experience in graphic design. I still suck at it. I had no experience in anything with content creation, videos, nothing. And so SG started as a one-page blog. And I just put a couple articles up, and then, it really wasn't anything for about a year. And then by 16, we started doing some deeper articles, and I brought on a good friend of mine in real life, and he did some stuff, and it was very, very basic and low key. And at one point I remember kind of just going through my head and saying, okay, if I'm going to grow this, obviously, need to kind of curate a community a little more. But I made the decision right at the beginning that I wasn't going to do it for money. And that sounds, I know a lot of people think that's really weird. Like, I still have people ask me, like, what do you do? Like, is this your career? No, it's not. Why do you still, at this point in time, years later, still refuse to monetize or anything? And my message has always been the same. One, my career, I do well for myself. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to spend the money to fund SG and the, site and everything else out of my own pocket. But two, my opinion was, if I'm going to battle the whole rage clickbait, all that kind of culture, the sad fact of the matter is, and I've talked to plenty of people that work in game media, I've talked to site leads, I've talked to, plenty of people about this, is the sad fact of the matter is balancing controversy and clicks and hot topics and racing to be the first to do something, leaks, etc. If you're in the space where you have to make a living on your site or on your channel, you have to dabble in that space. You just do. It's just, there was a line there that I didn't want to cross in kind of maintaining what I wanted Season Gaming to be. So
that's a harsh truth right there.
It's a fact. I mean, I've talked to I don't want to name names,
gotta
but
be a
people,
warrior if you wanna if you wanna take off quickly.
yeah, not necessarily like what we
That's
see on some
wild.
YouTube channels, right? But I mean, there are certain things that you're just going to have to play in that I didn't want to play in. And that holds true today. And I think that what I really enjoy about SG even now is we've grown a substantial amount. We're a much bigger outlet, channel, everything than we were at the start, but we're still small, right? In terms of the industry, it's still a small little outlet, but we've accomplished an awful lot, and we've done so without ever moving away from that. I've never monetized. There's never been a single ad on the site, not one. None of our stuff on our channels monetized. We don't do any of it for money. And along those lines, I have 9 or 10 people that write for Season Gaming, and all of them do it just for the love of gaming as well. And several of them have been with me for years now. And we have a really kind of passionate group at SG that write and review games and do all this stuff. And we're really kind of, it's almost like that old school camaraderie I told you about. We talk every day in our Discord. We have private, obviously, SG chats, for just the crew of SG, but we talk every day. It's people loving games and kind of covering games the way we want to cover games, how we think games should be covered. And that's just great. That's all I ever wanted SG to be. And I think because I am comfortable with that, and I'm not in that mindset. There's a lot of people that are in a mindset where it's like you always have to be growing and do whatever you need to do to grow. And you have to, they have all these kind of marks they want to hit. And I'm just fine. Like, if SG stays where it is now, that's fine, because it's a passion thing for me. It's not about achieving some grand scope or idea or any type of monetization that, will just either make me change the way I have to cover games, or on the other end of the spectrum, kind of take over my life from a time perspective. So it's become something I think really good and kind of unique in the gaming space.
No doubt, no doubt. So
sorry, that was a little long-winded, but just giving you context.
No. It was very soulful. So I appreciate you for laying that down. But I got to ask about your members now that you have on the panel with you for the podcast for Season Gaming. All right,
sure.
So I'm going to ask about each of them one at a time. Sure. Obviously, I'm talking about you, so I don't need to hear about Ains. Right? We got done talking about that for the last 2.5 hours. We good on that right now. So the first person I want you to tell me about, and say whatever you will about them.
Okay.
Have some
I'll
fun.
Be honest. Trust me, I'll be honest.
The guy Travis. How did you end up having him as a regular on SG?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We actually talked a little bit about this on Big Cast the other day, because we had a question from one of our community members. What's your guys' origin story? So Travis, I met through Cog. I think most people probably watching this know Cog over at Lords. So Cog and I are good buddies. Cog's a great dude, one of my favorite people I interact with. And I met Travis through him because him, Travis, and Abantis, who's also a great dude, did the Last Word podcast about Destiny. And I think I was on, Cog and I have been on a bunch of shows together. We've done stuff together. And I think he was telling me about Travis. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. Because at the time I was doing some extra content for the channel similar to this, where I was talking to people one-on-one, and we were having guests on Bitcast as well. And so had Travis and I had talked and done a show together, and just kind of hit it off. Like, it was kind of a funny thing, because Travis he's opinionated, and him and I don't see eye to eye on some things. But good. He is, it's a good thing, in my opinion, right? In my opinion, you don't want an echo chamber panel. And
me and my buddy that helps run this channel just got done arguing for like 20 minutes on stream about how we felt about Indiana Jones. So, like, I mean, if you can't do that, then what you really doing? Like, you know what I mean? What are you really doing?
I think
that ain't no fun.
Exactly. I think a lot of the shows, sadly, that are out there in the community are echo chambers. And I'm like, I don't know why you'd want to tune into a show where everyone on the panel is just saying everything you agree with all the time. That'd be boring as hell to me. So Travis kind of fit that niche of he's educated, like in gaming. You know what I mean? He plays a ton of games. He has obviously grown into one of the biggest reviewers at IGN now. So he has great perspective on kind of like the biggest media companies, biggest gaming media company in the world, whether you like them or not, it's a fact. But, you know, their perspective on how they publish things, how they review games. So I thought that perspective on the panel was good. And like I said, he gets a lot of people arguing with him all the time. That's okay. And I think the nice thing I like about Travis, one of the things I like about Travis is he is very, very open to people challenging him. And I think we all should be that way. Sure. And people challenge him all the time. And in my opinion,
of course.
Yeah, exactly.
I challenge him too.
I literally was challenging him in our Bitcast DM yesterday. Him and I went back and forth, and Hogue comes in. He's like, here's a versus right here. That's our versus, like Mortal Kombat. And, you know, and that happens a lot, but that's a good thing because you kind of keep each other honest. You keep each other on your toes. And I think that Travis does that exceedingly well, not only on Bitcast, but just in general. So, and at heart, that's the one thing I'll say about our panel. And I mean this 100% at heart. All of our panel, Dan, Travis, and Hogue, are genuinely good dudes, like genuinely. And so I think between being a really good guy, having a wealth of knowledge about gaming and game history and the games he plays every day and reviews, and then being able to be challenged and kind of argue when need be, I think it's a good combination for a panel member.
Okay. All right. So that was pretty, that was nice. That was very kind of you, right?
That's the nicest I could be about Travis, by the way.
I know. I mean, it's great that you brought up a story about you going at his neck. That's the way.
Yeah, we went at it yesterday for quite a while. Oh, you know what it was?
You introduced Travis. That's great.
I gave him crap because IGN posted. So if you don't know, like the one thing I know about more than nearly anyone is Halo. Go figure. But like, I do talk to people behind the scenes about what's going on with Halo. And so people come to me sometimes about what's going on with Halo. And so IGN posted that rumor about the Battle Royale thing, which I already know is false. It's wrong. And IGN posted it, and I gave him crap about it. I'm like, why is IGN posting a rumor that we already know is false, that has been debunked from some podcast? And him and I went back and forth about that quite a bit. But yeah, it's quite funny.
Okay, so now I got to ask you about Big Brother Dan.
Yes.
What's happening with him? Like, how do you end up being part of Season Game?
Dan's a real interesting one, and this is a true story. So Dan, back when Bitcast was early on, and it was me and Bert, so many people don't know Bert now, but he's the one that I started kind of SG with, a friend of mine in real life. Great dude. But he had some personal stuff. He stepped away from SG. So Dan, when Bert and I were the Bitcast, we had Dan on as a guest. Dan was part of a earlier podcast called Digital Hoarders, which was about owning your games digitally. It was just a play on the name. And I knew him from some friends. We had him on as a guest, and he was a kind of a good guest with me and Bert. He offered a different opinion, again, a different viewpoint. And the funny thing is, when I first talked to Dan, I asked him where he lived. Turns out he lives 10 minutes from me. Oh, that's not a joke. I did not know that he lived, across town, basically.
That's cool. So, you got somebody to get a beer with then,
Yeah. So we met up. We've had lunch. We meet up once in a while and have lunch and chat and everything in real life. And but anyway, so we had a good show with him. We brought him back as a second guest, had a good show again with him. We're like, why don't we see if Dan wants to come on permanently as our third member? And he did. And so he's been with Bitcast ever since episode 32, 33, and we're on 280 now. So it's been years. Dan's a really good dude. He is, the funny thing about Dan is what we call him for the Bitcast is he is the everyman gamer. And what we mean by that is he has the least amount of patience for nonsense, arguing about games, fanboys, people talking about things they don't know about. He has the least amount of patience for that stuff of anyone I know. He zero. And so he's not on social media a ton. He doesn't get involved in debates about stuff. He doesn't pay attention to any other shows. It's just not him. His thing is he likes the games he likes. They're mostly AAA, big budget games. He plays them a lot. He games every day. He plays a lot of games, but he just doesn't want to be involved in any of the noise. And so he is representative on the panel of kind of our guy who is not on Twitter, doesn't watch YouTube. You know what I mean? He's just a guy walking in your game store or going on the game store digitally and picking out a game to buy and play and doing that. And so he always offers kind of a funny perspective because he's older than me. He's gamed for longer than I have. And he's played thousands and thousands of games, but he doesn't get involved in any of the noise. And so he kind of gives us that perspective of just like, hey, what's the person on the street thinking about this game? And he'll give it to you. Yeah. Yeah. So outside of, our echo chambers.
So he brings kind of the boots on the ground.
Yeah, just your average perspective. Like, and he's very blunt too. So he'd be like, I played this game, it's terrible, don't play it. I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough.
Very straightforward, straight shooter. All right. Yep, and then of course, Mr. U of M, the man that's so proud of his Wolverines.
He sure is.
Last week, I heard, man, I seen all the tweets. Every time something big happened in the game, he was there saying something about there they go. That's all right. That's good. Oh yeah, touchdown instead of a field goal. Yeah. I seen this man talking on Twitter about his Wolverines. But Mr. Hogue Law, is a big part of your channel as well. Yeah. And he's actually the newer person
newest
on the channel than everybody else. So I gotta ask, like, what was it like, and how did you end up meeting him? And he has this whole law thing where he gives his opinion, and the whole ABK deal was a big deal. I'm sure he was getting calls left, right, and center to be on.
He's got a big audience. Yeah, he's got a big audience, and he gets, he's been on he's been all over the place. IGN reaches out to him, Last Stand and Colin reach out to him. Everyone reaches out to him regularly. But again, I came to know Hogue through some of his videos on his channel because he was gaining a bigger audience because of the legal stuff with ABK and other stuff.
Right.
And I think we invited him on as a guest. We had him as a guest, and then I told him, hey, I'd love to do my one-on-one show with you, and we had a great one-on-one chat. And at the time, we were me, Travis, and Dan were trying to find a fourth person for the panel. I've always liked 4 for a podcast gaming show. That's just, I think that's the sweet spot. And
I agree.
We were trying to find a fourth, and I reached out to several other people around, that you would know. I'm not going to name names, but, just good conversations and people that either couldn't commit to a weekly time or were already on other shows, whatever. And so had these good conversations with Hogue, and he wasn't originally someone I was considering for the show. But after we had these shows, I was like, you know what? Hogue may be a good fit if he's willing to do it, but he has his own channel. Obviously, he has a big, much larger channel than we have. He's already doing several videos a week, like, would he really want to do this every week? And so when I first talked to him, he said he was flattered. And if you know Hogue, he's a very sweet dude, super intelligent, great family. He's just really, again, down to earth, good guy. And he was like, I'd be willing to try it for a few weeks. That's what he told me. He said, I don't know if I can do it consistently. I'm happy to be a guest on occasion, but I don't want to commit to being on a show regularly. And I said, fine. Sure. I said, why don't you guest next week and we'll take it from there and let me know. And he did it for a few weeks, and I was pleasantly surprised for him to say that he just was really enjoying himself. He loved being on. He loved the camaraderie and kind of the conversations, and he didn't think that he would like it as much as he did. And so, at that point, he told me, let's do it. And he said, there's some other things we talked about and stuff, but the rest is kind of history. And what's great about Hogue, of course, is not only the legal aspects, which now give Bitcast, a lot of credence in the sense of if there's stuff going on like during ABK and other things, right? Having Hogue on there is definitive. Like, you know what I mean? He's so well versed in that stuff. It adds another layer to the show. But he is also, as you may know, extremely opinionated. And he is also someone like Travis who feels like, I'm going to tell you my opinion. My opinion's right. But if you disagree with it and want to debate about it, sure, that's fine to do. And so, we now have, between the 4 of us, with Dan being the way he is, and then Travis and Hogue both being opinionated, but willing to be challenged and kind of, open to challenge about it. It's a really kind of interesting
for days then.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where we'll go back and forth on the show, but it does create an interesting dynamic where you have four people who genuinely, get along and really appreciate one another. And we talk all behind the scenes every day, the four of us. But we will challenge each other a lot. And Hogue and Travis, like, we actually have a versus symbol that we put up on the show because Hogue and Travis will go at it, with disagreements. And we joke that here comes the versus moment, and our chat will put verses up in the chat. And it's funny. It gets heated sometimes, but not in a derogatory way. You know what I mean? It's not in a truly disrespectful way. It's just a heated debate. So good. It's a good dynamic, man. It's been a lot of fun since the four of us came together.
So that's pretty cool. So that's your current crew. That's how you're rocking in these YouTube streets out here. Looking good. I like it. I like it. So is there any ambition or things that you want to bring to your channel either coming soon or just something that you have an idea that you would like to bring that you're comfortable talking about here?
Sure. Yeah. One of the, like I said earlier, I'm pretty comfortable where the SG is, and I like what we're doing and where the focus is. I think last year we did 49. We just missed 50, but 50 reviews, game reviews. And if you think about it, a free site, no paid contributors, anything, to do 50 reviews, that means we're doing one a week. You know what I mean? Essentially, that's a lot of work. Never mind all our other articles and news and everything else and weekly show. So we're already doing quite a lot. But I think from a Bitcast and channel perspective, one thing I want to focus on this year and into the future is really having more industry people on. I talk to a lot of people in the industry and developers behind the scenes. And I mean, not a ton. I'm not trying to, say I'm certainly not anything special in the space, but, just people who have great perspective on what it truly means to develop a AAA game and what it truly means to be cross-play, or how you implement cross-save. You know what I mean? All these things that we take for granted in a lot of modern games, but just how complex they are. And what a game launch means and all these types of things. And I think that I want to bring that to the forefront a little more as possible. It's a challenge sometimes because a lot of people in the industry are either unable to speak up because they can't talk about what they're working on, or they're not able to due to NDAs or whatever else. Or two, they're afraid to speak out because they like being behind the scenes and just working, and they don't want to be brought up to the forefront to get questioned or attacked or anything else. So it's a challenge, but I think that the more that we can get actual developers talking in the space and talking about the complexities and what it really means to develop a game and do some of the things that we take for granted, the more, even if it's a little, the better understanding we'll have and the better appreciation we'll have for what developers go through. And when a game maybe launches not in the best shape, why? And why we shouldn't be pulling out the pitchforks and torches, you know what I mean, at every little announcement. So that's what I hope to do. I think that's in the spirit of what I try to accomplish with SG and in, the positivity around gaming. So that's what I really want to focus on.
Yeah, and I like that because in reality, I mean, it's cool to have this majestic thing, right? And I feel like gaming's been majestic for a lot of people since its inception, right? How'd you get this thing on a cartridge? How'd you get this on a disc? What were your trials and tribulations going through building something like this? We've heard about crunch within the industry. We've heard about, missing deadlines. We've had real world situations go on, Y2K. We've had, as of recently, COVID, slowing down the development and stuff like that. But one thing that we've never really had throughout gaming consistently is understanding behind what's going on, why, and what certain things really mean, and how much time, patience, or frustration goes into some of this stuff that gets put into a console that's a few $100s, and that we generally take advantage of. you know, on
We
a
take for
daily
granted.
basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely take it for granted. So I mean, as majestic and cool as gaming is, I kind of feel like at some point it needs to not be as convoluted and hard to understand as it's been traditionally,
Yeah.
because you know more people are interested. These jobs need to be more understood and have better direction into how you get to become, you know, a person within the game industry, what it's like to own your own business. A lot of the stuff within gaming, like whether people want to, you know, agree with it or not, it's very much beta.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
It's
know
still
what I mean?
early for
It's
the medium. Yes.
like everything seems to be like a wild west, to the sense where it's like, we're gonna give this a swing, but I have no idea. There's no real statistics backing up whether this is gonna work or not. We're just shooting a shot.
Yep.
And with that happening now, I feel like there's no excuse for us figuring out a way, whether it's, you know, us as people within the gaming industry, the government, whatever. To me, there's no excuse as to not understanding or having some sort of guideline on how to get from A to B, whether it's the information of how this game was developed, which everybody wants to have their secrets and stuff like that. Yeah. We have, you got your apple pie, but mine was put, I put some cinnamon and a little nutmeg. And, it tastes a
Yeah.
little
Your
different.
recipe.
So I understand people wanting to keep their secrets and whatnot, but at the same time, I feel like to have a better understanding of how this works, like I feel like any YouTuber can rip apart a TV and tell you all about it. Or not any YouTuber, excuse me, but like people that want to like work into TVs have a pretty good understanding of, oh, I need to do this in college. I need to go, get my certification in A, B, C. Same with like being a mechanic, working on airplanes. That's super dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of moving parts and things that you have to understand within doing a job as technical as that. So to me, it's just like, man, we need to have some sort of clear path, not only just with the understanding of fans out there, so they can kind of get on board and see, maybe you shouldn't harass this developer because they're probably because they're going through A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But also to those of us that were like us as kids, that were like, man, gaming, that is really cool, and I'd love to do it, but I don't fucking know the first thing about what to do to even go down that avenue.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know who to ask. It's almost like a privilege.
Yeah.
When you get to a point of meeting somebody that's willing to show you A, B, and C. It's like, man, like I just so happened to, walk into the quick shop and ran into, Jet Li, and he taught me how to do some of these kicks. And like it's almost that rare, it seems, that people are willing to pick somebody up and lift them up, help them out, make them understand. And it seems like you kind of just got done alluding to that a little bit ago, where it's like, people, almost courted me and started telling me some stuff, helped me understand some of my thinking was a little jaded, wrong. And I got a better understanding of it now.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a good point. I think it's because the medium is still, to your point, and it's still a young medium at heart, and it's still a medium that is steadily evolving, and I think it still has to figure out a lot of things still, and that is definitely part of it for sure.
No doubt. I want to get you up out of here in just a moment. So I got a few quick hitter questions. I want you just to kind of go through, tell me what you think and everything. And I'm going to start off with the developer direct that happened today that I personally thought was pretty hot. It had some moments where it was kind of like, I loved seeing the developers talk and whatnot about the games and stuff like that. But um, there's always, good and bad with anything that you see, right? Um, but I want to ask you in particular, how did you feel about each of the games that happened? You don't have to dive into every single game, but but just tell me what you thought of like Aura and all that.
Yeah. So Aura looks fantastic. I am not a real-time strategy game player anymore. They don't do much for me nowadays, but if you are into that genre, that game's going to be great. So put that on your radar. Indiana Jones, I'm super hyped for. Obviously, my era, my generation loves Indiana Jones. Means a lot to me as an IP and a character. I like what Machine Games is doing with it from what I saw. I'm very excited about it. Hellblade 2, it's almost a known quantity at this point. I'm super pumped for that. I love dark games. I love horror games. I love the original Hellblade, despite its, few faults. The only slight disappointment about Hellblade 2 is hearing that it's probably going to be about an 8-hour game again. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I was hoping, given the time of development and scope, that this was going to be slightly larger. I'm not talking open world 50-hour game, but I was hoping maybe a 12, 14, 15-hour game, maybe a little bigger. So, but we'll see. I'm sure it's going to be awesome no matter what. Avowed, I'm very excited for. Obsidian has fantastic RPG roots. I really love the art design. I love what they showed today in terms of the worlds. It looks like it's going to be fun to explore. Little iffy on the first-person combat. It looked a little clunky. Now, that can obviously be tuned up for launch. We'll see. But regardless, I'm super excited for Avowed 2. And Mana, I'm not a huge JRPG fan nowadays, so it doesn't really interest me. I'm glad to see it coming on Xbox. I thought it was a nice little addition to the show today. So I'm happy for that. I thought the show overall was excellent. I really enjoyed it.
No doubt. Okay. Yeah, and with that Hellblade, I was surprised. I mean, the price was pretty cool to see. It was only like $50, right? But at the same time, I was just like, that kind of makes sense with that length of a game because the first one was hella short, right?
Yeah, it was short. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little surprised by that, but all in all, the showcase was really good. It was definitely necessary. The only thing that I was like, dang, is it's like I got another like 4.5 months until I get my first game from that showcase. I was like, damn, it's a little different than a Shadow Drop.
Yes, it's definitely back ended right to the end of 2024 for sure.
For sure. All right, and then going on to the next quick hitter question I got for you, it's a gaming genre that you refuse. What's one that you don't really like? I mean, you kind of just said a little bit JRPGs.
Yeah,
one of them, and also what was it?
Real-time strategy
type of game.
Yeah, I grew up loving those games. Command and Conquer, I played the hell out of, but I don't play them anymore. I just don't play them anymore. I don't really know how else to say it. JRPGs is a funny one for me because like I'm super excited about Infinite Wealth, Like a Dragon. I love Persona 5, Persona 4, but most JRPGs I've kind of like, I loved them as a kid and I don't enjoy them now. And I don't really know why that is. I don't know if it's just the design of them or the music. I don't really know what it is, but they don't do the same thing for me nowadays that they did when I was a kid. I much prefer Western RPGs.
Fair enough. One of my favorite questions, what's your favorite studio and what game best represents that studio?
Holy crap. Wow. Favorite studio. Well, I guess I'll cheat a little bit because it's modern. But From Software, I'm a big Dark Souls stan. And Elden Ring is, if not my favorite game of all time, one of my top 3 or 5.
Oh man, Elden Ring is the game that lets everybody know that they can play Souls games.
That they can do what? I'm sorry?
That they can play Souls games.
Yes.
It's like the perfect entry point to comfortable ass whoopings that you're gonna take.
It is, in my opinion, and some people get mad when I say this. Elden Ring's pretty easy from a difficulty perspective, but the scope of that game, I have over 400 hours in it. I've started it 6 times. I'm on my 3rd actual playthrough, and I am still discovering new things like crazy. The depth of the lore, the enemies, the builds, the world, I could go on about that game forever. It is absolutely phenomenal.
I fell in love with that game when I got disrespected by the by the tree sentinel. Like, because I was just like, I thought I was like, oh, okay. I played a couple of Souls games. I've never been a Souls guy because I just the punishment. I'm not there for punishment for hours like that. But I respected the hell out of the tree sentinel because like I came into that game and I was like, man, like that very first boss that you see like when you start the game, I felt like I did really well versus him, right? I was like, yeah, like all right, fine, let's get into this game. Let's see what it's all about. This ain't no thing. I'm walking out, start making my kills and whatnot. You know, you see the tree sentinel right there, right? You know, you're just in the pasture, you know, just hanging out in the plains, you know, just doing his own thing,
looking riding his horse back and forth.
And you know, I walk up to him, just like, you know, like I personally, at the point, I didn't know that it was an enemy. I was thinking, you know, like maybe this dude got a horse for me because, you know, at the point you didn't have a horse.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for my horse, right? So I go up, I'm just like, man, this dude got a big ass horse. Like maybe I can get something like that. I go up and holler at him, and he ain't hollering back. He is striking, and that man demolished me. And I went back to him, I want to say like 8 times, and I realized that there is no pass and go right here.
No, that's a comeback later.
Yeah. This is, and that's when I figured out I fell in love with this game because I was just like, I don't have to do this right now.
Exactly.
I don't have to deal with this bullshit.
Yep.
I can leave. And when I left and I came back, man, I wiped the floor with that sucker. And I felt so good. And that's what got me into Elden Ring, was figuring out that, I don't have to deal with this. I can leave and come back. And there's not very many Souls games where it's like, no, like, you got to deal with that right now.
Yeah, Souls games are very interesting because they develop games in a very old school methodology. And what I mean by that is they expect the player to figure things out on their own, and they expect the player to improve their own skill set enough to overcome the challenge, which is the games we grew up with, right? The 8 and 16-bit games were like that. And so you've got these modern kind of fantasy worlds with big enemies and mechanics and all these deep things in a modern game, but it's got the methodology of the old games. And I think that's why I adore them so much. I adore From Software. They've become probably my favorite studio.
All right. And that's why that was the answer. Next question I gotta ask is, what games are you most excited for coming in the future? It doesn't have to be this year or whatever. It can even be like, games that you've heard a whisper about. So like, what games are you excited for?
So Shadow of the Erdtree for Elden Ring, the expansion, of course. I think I'm really excited about Infinite Wealth coming here in a few weeks. Like a Dragon, I really loved the first Like a Dragon, loved it. So I'm really excited about diving into that one. I think that the next Gears of War, I am pumped for. So I hope that we see what Coalition's been cooking up for some time soon, at least see it soon. And I'm a big Gears guy. If Halo is my A, Gears was always kind of my B. And I'm really excited about whatever the next Gears game shapes up to be. And then, from there, I don't really know. There's nothing sitting out there on the horizon that is like Elden Ring was for me. Like Elden Ring was that game that was coming that, was going to be it for me, as was Cyberpunk and a few games like that. I don't have one of those out there right now, I would say. But those are a couple examples.
So GTA 6, shoulder shrug.
No, I mean, like everybody else in the world, I will buy GTA 6 at launch and I'll have a ton of fun with it. But it's a game that I look at as a fun sandbox, like a toy set. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
I don't look at that the same way as a game that'll move me like Elden Ring would. The interesting thing about that statement is Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. So, and it moves me like that story and characters, Arthur Morgan and all that. Some of my favorites of all time, but GTA doesn't have that same click for me. GTA I love just to mess around with.
Well, yeah, GTA is so modern, right?
Yeah,
As
it's
to
just
where
different.
Red Dead Redemption kind of takes you off into like a dreamland of here you are a cowboy again. It's like you're like, I can't be that today, but in GTA, just like they get in their car and drive out the garage, I can do that.
Yeah, it's different. So, but GTA 6 obviously will be, be a crazy game. Crazy game.
All right, so and then one of my last questions, one of my favorite ones as well. If you were to revive 2 dead IPs, what IPs are you bringing back and giving AAA money to?
Oh my gosh. Say one would be, assuming this is an easy one for me from the love of the IP, but I don't know if I would still love it as much given what I just said about JRPGs, but Phantasy Star is one of them.
Okay.
I'm a diehard Phantasy Star fan from the younger days. It was my favorite RPG as a kid. Yeah, and Sega, so Phantasy Stars, one of them, not online, a true Phantasy Star.
Okay.
Yeah, RPG.
Online.
Yeah. No, the real kind of 1 to 4, if you will. The second one, wow. What IP do I love that I haven't gotten to play? Maybe I'd have to think about this for a long time. I'm sure there's a better answer, but maybe Project Gotham Racing.
Trying to see that kudos spot.
Yeah. So I know like Horizon and some games now, the Crew Motorfest have kind of played in that space in the modern time, but Project Gotham was really, really cool for what it did at the time because it kind of combined, it would almost walk that line between Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon, right? It was kind of like that in between. So really love that IP as well. It's sad to see that go. I think maybe I'll throw another one just for the hell of it. Time Splitters from an FPS standpoint. Love Time Splitters. The fact that they were in the process of bringing that back and now have been closed was really disappointing to me.
Tragic.
Yeah, sucks.
All right, and now we've come to the final 2 questions that I always like to kind of smush together into one because it's like positive, negative. All right.
Okay.
And I always like to go negative first because I like to end the show on a positive note.
Okay.
So with the negative one first, I gotta ask you, what about gaming drives you crazy? Like, do you just like absolutely dislike?
I think we've talked about some of it to some degree, right? Some of the parts of the community that I think as gaming is now such a popular medium and there's so much coverage of it in content creation, I do get annoyed at people who are, younger content creators who have never worked in any space, even remotely related to gaming and application development or anything, have no idea what they're talking about, but talk as if they know what studios should be doing, right? Or companies should be doing. That drives me nuts. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect that frustrates me is I feel like, I've said this many times, I feel like as the industry has grown and become what it is today, and, with the billions of people playing games and as big as it is, I feel like we've lost some of the camaraderie of just being a gamer. There was a time where being a gamer was a niche thing. And if you were a gamer, you were automatically accepted as a group because you were a gamer. And you just kind of, that was a thing. And I feel we've lost some of that. I think because so many people play games, it doesn't have the same kind of cachet between one another. Like walking up to someone and just saying, I'm a gamer. It's like, okay, it's not the same as it was when we were younger.
Yeah. And I think what kind of goes with some of that is like, you got to remember back in those days, we had arcades. We had midnight releases
face to face. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We like we had reasons to congregate.
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
So now that we do everything based from home, it's hard to say anybody or and you see a lot of people that do their talking about games on social media sites and stuff like that. It's hard to really understand if that person's really a gamer or just a mere person talking like stating an opinion just
Yeah,
for the moment, but
yeah,
really not really dug in or caring about
caring. Yeah,
this actual hobby itself. So because like when you went to the arcades, you were like, we're all gamers. We know
yeah,
this
yeah.
because we're here.
Yep.
Same with
Exactly.
same with the midnight release. It's like you know all these motherfuckers gotta work in the morning. But they are here right
Yeah.
now and they're gonna
Yep.
go home and play this game until they gotta go to work because that's what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
One
But
of my
like
best
talking to somebody
experiences.
on the internet, it's kind of weird because it's like, are you even a gamer? But then at the same time, if I do all this background checking, then I'm weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
So it's just like a weird space. I feel like what we need again is, or what we need more of, is events in places to go to conversate and actually be like, yo, we enjoy this hobby and we know all these other people and see all these other people on like a regular yearly or monthly basis.
yeah,
Right. So then, I mean, when there's a fad, people run to it, right? But then when something becomes regular, those fad chasers don't keep returning and coming back, right? It's
yeah.
like when there's a Spider-Man, right? And then a Spider-Man 2, some of the people were just there for the cachet of Spider-Man, but the other people were like, no, I really want to see what the next one is. So I'm gonna get every iteration of it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah,
get 2, I'm gonna get 3, I'm gonna get Venom, I'm gonna get all of this stuff, whatever. Right. So I feel like just these computers and websites and social medias and stuff like that kind of pulled us away from actual interaction. Would you treat this person this way
yeah, yeah. It's very
without your
different.
keyboard? You know
Yeah,
what I'm
it's
saying?
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it, and I say that, of course, realizing a lot. Like, I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for modern content creation. And I realize some of the positives. There's lots of positives and benefits as well, but it's just different. That's all.
Just
You
needs to
know,
be more
there's
balanced.
yeah, yeah. Some things are better, some things are worse. It's pretty much how everything goes.
And and then on the flip side to this question, what would be a dream come true for you? And you can be selfish with this one. You don't have to think about everybody. You can be like, hey, I want my channel to do this, or I want to, compete in, HCS and win this or whatever. Like, what is like your gaming fantasy or dream come
Gaming
true?
fantasy.
What would that look like?
Um, Probably to be able to do and talk about games like we're saying, right? Talk about it from the perspective we are, that I created Season Gaming for, to do that in that vein and realistically make a good living about it without having to do the negative things we talked about, right? Just to be able to positively talk and write about games and developers and do previews and reviews and do that without having to chase clicks and kind of the modern media problems. Being able to do that for a living and do it realistically and staying positive would be a dream.
Well, that's phenomenal, and that's also Ains Ainsley. That's the man from Season Gaming right here before us right now. Thank you so much again for being part of this show. I know it kind of went on a little long, but man, it's just when you were cooking about them old school consoles and stuff like that, like it just like I just had to keep asking questions. I was just like, man, this man was there around the same times as I was. He's a little bit older than me, but but he
It's all
gets
right.
it. He gets it. He's been there.
Yeah.
He's done that. He's seen that. He's played that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, so thank you for having me on. It's been fun. It's a great conversation. And I find that when I talk to people in our era, if you will. And Cog and I do this all the time. Cog and I will talk for 3 hours on a show, and we could keep going, just keep going. You know what I mean? Because same era as well. And it's like, it goes back to what I said about the camaraderie, right? It's just, there's something about that nature of those gaming times that we kind of get. So yeah, thank you so much, man. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, I brought up a lot of memories that I hadn't thought about in a while. So thank you.
Yeah, man. I'm happy to do that. And that's what we do here on Behind Them Sticks every Thursday, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you guys tune in for other episodes that we're going to be doing down the line. But one thing that I do want you to do for me real quick before we get up out of here, which I like to do at the beginning and at the end of every show, is let everybody know where they can find you. Just one mo again.
Yeah. So, yeah, appreciate it. You can find me as Ains. Like I said, there's no other Ainses out there that I'm aware of. So you can find me there everywhere, mostly on Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky now. Trying to post more on Threads just because Twitter's a mess. So you can find me there. And then, of course, Season Gaming. So seasongaming.com, Season Gaming on YouTube. And check us out, the Bitcast, as we talk through the podcast live show every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. So we're like on couple hours before the Lord, so we have a lot of community members who watch us and then go to the Lords after our show. So it kind of works out.
That's a good spot to be right there.
Yeah, and those, I know those guys well. We talk all the time, so it's good. So yeah, just appreciate it again. And if you check out SG, just check out the contributors as well and kind of the about us and see what you like. It's a good group.
No doubt. And again, I gotta say it. I appreciate you so much for taking your time out, talking about, your life, your come up, your the way that you see, perceived, and played games throughout your life and whatnot. Thank you, Ains, for coming through. Thanks to everybody out here watching this. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you haven't already. Share this out. Let everybody else know that we just got done doing this show Behind Them Sticks, and it was phenomenal. It was a really good show and whatnot. And make sure you guys come through tomorrow for our panel show that we have called Bullsitting with me, Loke, Cozy Beluga, Matt Likes Games, and usually a guest. And we'll be talking about and breaking down the whole developer direct and what we thought and everything like that. But thank you so much, everybody, for stopping through and saying everything that you guys have been saying through the chat and whatnot. Thank you, Ains, for coming through here. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolutely wonderful night. So y'all make sure that you guys do what I always say and keep it gaming or keep it moving. But I always almost slip and forget this. I need you, Ains, to describe gaming for me in just 3 words.
3 words. The best medium. There you go.
Damn, that was fast. That was perfect. Y'all have a wonderful rest of the night. Have a great weekend. I'll see you soon. And as I always tell you guys, keep it gaming or keep it moving. Peace out, y'all.